LoveLore Library. Chapter 157. In the dimly lit basement, the smell of blood was everywhere. Jiang Yu gradually regained consciousness. She trembled and opened her eyes, but what came into view was Wenhao's blood-red eyes. "Teacher Wenhao, what are you doing?" Jiang Yu subconsciously struggled. At this time, she realized that her whole body was tied to a chair with a rope. Because she struggled a little fiercely, the whole chair fell to the ground, and her head also came into close contact with the ground. The sticky liquid occupied the side of Jiang Yu's face. The red liquid was cold and sticky. "This is blood." "Ah!" Jiang Yu screamed, and her whole face became pale. "What are you panicking for?" Wenhao's voice was low and hoarse. "This is all my blood," Wenhao said while squatting down in a weird motion, pinching Jiang Yu's chin with his fingers, forcing her to look at him. At this time, Jiang Yu discovered that although Wenhao's upper body was still wearing a clean white shirt, his lower body had already been dyed red with blood. Jiang Yu's eyes widened abruptly, and her pale lips were trembling. "It's all for you." Wenhao's voice strangely rose. "Didn't you want to plot against Su Wan? The knockout drug I gave you just now was what you prepared for Su Wan, and..." Wenhao's fingers unconsciously pinched Jiang Yu's chin. "And these little props in the basement, I think you will like them, you will definitely like them." While speaking, Wenhao suddenly stood up, picked up a whip on the ground and slammed it on Jiang Yu's face. "Ah!" The huge whipping force was accompanied by sharp stinging pain, making Jiang Yu immediately cry out in pain, and her white and tender face was also whipped with a red bloodstain at this moment. "Slut! Slut! It's all because of you. Everything is ruined." Wenhao madly vented the despair and fear in his heart while whipping Jiang Yu. Su family villa. It was already midnight when Su Wan and Su Rui returned home. In the dark room, Su Rui quietly held Su Wan in his arms. "Wife, let's leave this world quickly." Su Rui didn't like this world. It was full of idiots and lunatics. And he could only look but not eat. He was not happy at all. "Oh." Su Wan rubbed against Su Rui's arms. "Su Rui, did you get rid of Jiang Yu?" Although she didn't know why Jiang Yu went out in a hurry, it was obvious that everything was done by Su Rui. Isn't there a saying that goes, "The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear"? People like her and Wenhao don't need anyone else to deal with them. They've dug their own graves. Yes, General Su didn't do anything. He just castrated Wenhao and sealed his acupoints so that he wouldn't feel any pain for 4 hours. This beast actually dared to covet their family's Shao Wan. He's simply tired of living. Jiang Yu knew that he was monitoring Su Wan's phone, but she didn't know that her phone had already been monitored by Su Rui. Compared to General Su's ruthlessness, female lead Darren, you're still too inexperienced. Su Rui doesn't have to do it himself. Wenhao, who has been stimulated to madness by him, will definitely entertain Jiang Yu well. And when 4 hours had passed, Su Rui's lips curled into a mocking arc. Wenhao, Jiang Yu, none of them can escape. Jiang Yu did not return overnight. The next day, the criminal police captain of City D came to the Su family early in the morning. It turned out that Wenhao was found dead in the basement of his home in the early morning. The body was found by the hourly servant who came to his home to clean early in the morning. The police found blood, skin tissue, and hair belonging to another person at the scene of the crime. Jiang Yu's figure was also found in the surveillance video of the villa, so the police initially suspected that Jiang Yu was the murderer of Wenhao. Hearing this news, Wenshu fainted immediately. With the disappearance of Jiang Yu and the tragic death of Wenhao, the ambiguous relationship between the two people and the hot video were once again mentioned by everyone. There were even well-informed people who said that the police also found several phone recordings in Wenwenhao's home, which were all conversations about how he and Jiang Yu planned to frame Su Wan. The preliminary judgment was that Wenwenhao deliberately recorded it, intending to threaten Jiang Yu in the future. Perhaps the two people turned against each other because of this. Because she couldn't stand the successive blows, Wen Shu's health was getting worse and worse. She was sometimes in a coma and sometimes awake. Every time she woke up, she would cry and call her daughter's name, and the more so, the more Su Haiqing felt sad for his disappointing daughter. On many sleepless nights, Su Haiqing couldn't help but think, if they didn't recognize Jiang Yu, then what would be the fate of their family? He, Wen Shu, and Su Wan, the family of three, would always be the same as before, living a happy life. And Jiang Yu, who has been studying independently since she was a child, could still study, graduate, and even work and live safely even without the Su family. Unfortunately, everything has changed now, because when Shu was too weak, Su Wan applied for a suspension of school after school started and often accompanied her by the hospital bed. Do you feel guilty? Su Rui looked at the unconscious woman on the hospital bed and glanced at Su Wan, who looked a little haggard. Guilty? Su Wan smiled. The reason why wicked people are called wicked is because they never feel guilty. Soft-hearted people can't be mission enforcers. Although Wen Shu's current situation is because of Jiang Yu, and Jiang Yu's matter is inseparable from Su Wan and Su Rui, but Su Wan has always felt that she has a clear conscience. She will not do something like Jiang Yu while thinking that she was forced. She is innocent, she was forced, others can't help but forgive herself. These are just the thoughts of cowards deceiving themselves. Seeing that Su Wan's eyes were still serious and bright, Su Rui finally felt relieved. He saw that Su Wan had been taking care of Wen Shu day and night for the past few days. He was afraid that her heart would be left with a bad shadow because of this world. Fortunately, Su Wan's heart is still the same as before, and she will never be soft-hearted when she needs to be ruthless. So, when are we leaving? Since Jiang Yu killed Wenwenhao and was wanted, Su Rui was reminded that the mission failed, which also means that Su Wan's mission was successful. According to Su Rui's idea, he will give all the shares of his company to the Su family and then propose to Su Wan, so that he can withdraw from this world without regret. After all, at Su Wan's age in this world, she can only do this. Marriage? That would be many years in the future. In this world, after meeting Jiang Yu, that crazy woman, General Su has stayed here long enough. He simply doesn't want to stay here for another minute, okay? However, Su Wan doesn't seem to want to withdraw from this world immediately. Hearing Su Rui's question, she stood up and tucked Wen Shu in the hospital bed, then turned her head and looked at Su Rui with a smile. Didn't I just say it? As for me, I'm an evil man. With that said, the smile on Su Wan's face became a little mysterious. Su Rui, do you know where Jiang Yu is? Jiang Yu. Su Rui frowned. That woman can hide, the police haven't caught her yet. Accompany me to a place tomorrow, let's see what Jiang Yu is doing. Chapter 158. The cold night of early spring was still cold to the bone. In the old district of the north of City D, it was already dark before 8 o'clock. There were very few pedestrians on the street, and the shops on both sides of the street had already closed for the day. The dim yellow street lamps cast long shadows on the road. A skinny shadow took advantage of the darkness to quickly shuttle through the quiet streets. At the corner of the street, a slow private car slowly drove over. Seeing the car, the shadow seemed to be frightened and abruptly rushed into a dead end at the side. There was no light in the alley. Daily garbage was piled up on the walls, and near the garbage dump was the temporary residence of two stray dogs. Woof woof. Woof woof woof. The uninvited guest who suddenly rushed into the alley disturbed the stray dogs in the alley. They couldn't help barking twice, and the figure seemed to be anxious. She quickly raised her legs and kicked a few times in the darkness. Don't bark. Don't bark. The deliberately lowered female voice was hoarse and low. The two stray dogs, who were not strong, were kicked and immediately fell to the ground and whimpered. I told you not to bark. Jiang Yu tightened the thin coat on her body. When she landed, she frowned. She seemed to have stepped on something. When Jiang Yu's eyes adapted to the darkness in the alley, she looked down at her feet, and her eyes widened. She stepped on a person's arm. In a panic, Jiang Yu subconsciously turned around and ran. Wen Wenhao's death had left an indelible shadow in her heart. That day, in that dark basement, she was abused by Wen Wenhao, who was in a delirious state, for several hours. Just when she was in despair and thought that she was going to die there, Wen Wenhao suddenly fell to the ground. His face was pale, and his whole body rolled on the ground in pain. Jiang Yu took advantage of Wen Wenhao struggling on the ground to grab a blade on the ground and cut the rope. At that time, she was already injured all over, but in order to survive, she still burst out her greatest potential. Just when she was running away, Wen Wenhao, who was still bleeding under her, suddenly rushed over and hugged her. While the two people were entangled, the blade in Jiang Yu's hand pierced into Wen Wenhao's heart. Bright red warm blood sprayed on Jiang Yu's face. At that moment, the world was blood red. She saw Wen Wenhao's eyes widen, and he lost his breath in front of her little by little. He died. Did he kill someone? Murder. Jiang Yu never thought that she would kill people, but she didn't mean it. She didn't mean it. Not me, not me. She dropped the blade in a panic and fled from Wen Wenhao's villa. Jiang Yu knew that she couldn't go home. She withdrew a sum of money from the bank's ATM for the first time, and then went into hiding. Now that she is wanted by the police in D City, Jiang Yu used her money to rent a dilapidated basement in the old city. She only dared to come out at night to get some fresh air and buy some daily necessities. She did not expect to encounter such a thing in this deserted alley. That person, is he dead? If he is dead, will he be discovered tomorrow? Will the police find her when they come here? For a while, Jiang Yu thought a lot in her heart, and she stopped leaving. No, I can't let such a thing happen. She is innocent. She didn't kill Wen Wenhao. Wen Wenhao wanted to kill her. She did it in self-defense. She doesn't want to go to jail, she doesn't want to be caught, she is innocent. Thinking like this, Jiang Yu gritted her teeth and turned back to the place where she had just stood. She bent down and pulled the arm hard to pull out the suspected dead man. What appeared in front of Jiang Yu was a man with a firm and deep outline. She had to say that this was a very handsome man, and at this time, his body was still warm, and he was still breathing. He was still alive, not dead. Jiang Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief, saw the blood on the man's chest, and looked at the obviously expensive watch on his wrist. Jiang Yu hesitated for a moment. This watch will be worth a lot of money if it is taken to the black market, but taking it without asking is stealing. Although she is wanted, Jiang Yu, who has always felt that she is above board, does not allow herself to be a thief at this time. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Yu's eyes flashed, and finally she made up her mind. She held the unconscious man on her back and struggled to carry him out of the alley. Since this person was still alive, he had to save him. If he really had a high social status, then he would definitely not mistreat his savior. If he was a person with power and influence, maybe he could help him overturn the case. With such a complicated mood, Jiang Yu carried the man to her home. The man was seriously injured. In order to save him, Jiang Yu had to find a black market doctor and took out all her remaining money to perform surgery on him. After the surgery, the man was still in a coma, but his face was getting better and better. By the third night, Jiang Yu, who was penniless, was really hungry. She huddled in the dark and damp room and looked at the unconscious man on the small wooden bed. His diamond watch was still shining in the darkness. Jiang Yu swallowed her saliva, and her eyes were a little hesitant. Gulp! Her stomach cried out again, and Jiang Yu, who was already lightheaded and weak, finally stood up slowly and walked to the man step by step. Her fingers were stiff, and finally touched the expensive watch. I'm really hungry. I'm going to mortgage it, so that everyone has something to eat. You have to spend money to change your medicine and eat, right? If you don't speak, I'll take it as you agree. With that said, Jiang Yu quickly pulled off the watch, and then hurriedly opened the door and ran out. After she left, two figures appeared quietly. The old basement was filled with a damp smell, and Su Rui couldn't help but frown. Looking at the man who was still unconscious on the small bed, Su Wan couldn't help but smile. Jing Lai, I found you. 1 month later, Xiao Wan, do you remember this place? I remember I fainted around here. Jing Lai drove his Hummer, parked the car on the side of the road, and stared at the old house in front of him. Jing Lai's eyes were a little complicated. His most trusted men betrayed him, and the woman he loved most stabbed him in the back. That was a month ago. He desperately ran away, and finally passed out near here. At that time, he knew that he would always be found, and then he would be quietly killed. In this world, people die every day, and the death of a gang boss like him, who is full of evil, is regarded as eliminating evil for the people. Who cares who killed him and where he died? Jing Lai really thought he was dead, so when he opened his eyes and saw the bright crystal lamp and the cold and beautiful girl in front of him, he thought he was in heaven. Hee, how can bad people be qualified to go to heaven? You're awake. The girl's voice was as cold as her expression. At that time, Jing Lai reflected for a while before he realized that he did not die, he survived. And the girl in front of him must be his savior. Even if the sun was shining brightly, Su Wan's face still didn't show much warmth. She sat on the front passenger seat and coldly looked at Jing Lai's side profile. Mr. Jing, how many times do you want me to tell you? I didn't save you. I still have to go back and prepare for the engagement ceremony. You pulled me here, what do you want to do? Xiao Wan, I like you. Jing Lai stared at Su Wan's eyes seriously. Don't promise Xiao Qi. What he gave you, I can also give you. Billions, billions, or even trillions. As long as there's a number, Jing Lai can do it. What do I need so much money for? And trillions, do you think it's ghost money? Su Wan was almost amused by Jing Lai's words. Mr. Jing, I don't think we're very familiar. What do you like about me? Just because you think I saved you. If I didn't save you, would you still like me? Jing Lai heard Su Wan's words and stared at her blankly. You saved me. Even if it wasn't you. I still like you, It turned out that Boss Jing's setting was actually to fall in love at first sight with the savior he saw at first sight. Su Wan unfastened her seatbelt and quickly jumped out of the car. Mr. Jing, I'll leave first. I think you can stroll around here a few more times. Maybe you can meet your true savior. As she spoke, Su Wan waved her hand with her back facing Jing Lai and quickly ran to the other side of the road to take a taxi and leave. Xiao Wan. Xiao Wan. Jing Lai followed her out of the car and shouted a few words towards the opposite side of the street. Unfortunately, Su Wan had already disappeared in a taxi. AI. Jing Lai heaved a heavy sigh. He was about to drive and chase after her when the corner of his clothes was suddenly grabbed by someone. Jing Lai suddenly turned his head, his gaze cold. What appeared in front of him was a woman wearing an old man's jacket. Her complexion was sallow and her long hair was messy and dull. At this time, this sloppy-looking woman's eyes were shining as she looked at Jing Lai. Is that you? Do you still remember me? The woman's voice was very hoarse, and Jing Lai frowned slightly. Get lost. He didn't like people touching or approaching him, especially after what had happened. He had a very strong vigilance towards everyone. It's me, it's me. Jiang Yu wiped her face and turned to think that the other party didn't seem to have seen her face. Jiang Yu immediately took out the watch from her arms. Do you still recognize this watch? I redeemed it. Seeing the watch in Jiang Yu's hand, the disgust between Jing Lai's eyebrows became more obvious. When he woke up, he found that his watch was missing. At that time, he was still wondering if he had dropped it in a panic. It turned out that someone stole it while he was unconscious. It took Jiang Yu a month of hard and tiring work to redeem the watch. That night, she came back with money and food and found that the person she saved was gone. She thought that he had woken up and left by himself, so she waited in the basement for a few days and he didn't show up again. Later, Jiang Yu remembered the watch. She was afraid that the other party would misunderstand that she stole his watch and left without saying goodbye, so she tried her best to redeem the watch. These days, she has been wandering the streets, just to find that person and return the watch to him. This watch. I didn't mean to pawn it. You were seriously injured at that time, and I gave all my possessions to the doctor to save you. Jiang Yu saw Jing Lai looking at her with eyes full of disgust, and she immediately explained anxiously. Oh. After listening to her words, Jing Lai sneered. You mean, you saved me? How do you want me to thank you? How much do you want? No, I don't want money, I really didn't do it for money. Jiang Yu heard the sarcasm in Jing Lai's tone, and she immediately waved her hand desperately. No money. Then how about I give you the watch? Jing Lai looked at Jiang Yu's hands that were no longer white, and the watch in her palm seemed so out of place. No, I'm here to return the watch to you. I don't need it. I feel sick when someone else touched it. Jing Lai raised his hand and knocked the watch in Jiang Yu's palm to the ground. Since you don't want anything, then I'm leaving. As he spoke, he got on the car without hesitation, started the engine and left. No money. No watch. Then why did she bother to say that she saved him? If she really did a good deed without leaving her name, then she wouldn't have appeared. Since she appeared, she must have something to ask. Jing Lai has seen many such people. As Jing Lai expected, it didn't take long for him to see the woman again. She quietly lingered near the Su family. At that time, the Su family was holding the engagement banquet of Su Wan and Shao Qi. Many local celebrities came, and the woman was hiding in a corner, staring at the Su family's villa with resentment. What do you want to do? Jing Lai's voice suddenly sounded behind Jiang Yu. Jiang Yu was scared and pale. When she saw Jing Lai's face, she couldn't help but look happy. It's you. Are you looking for me? Jing Lai. I asked what you are doing. Jing Lai asked while following Jiang Yu's gaze and saw Su Wan and Shao Qi in pure white dresses. At this time, Jiang Yu's eyes began to blur, and she couldn't help but say, Do you know? I grew up with Brother Shao, and we have a good relationship. If it wasn't for that bitch Su Wan, we would have. Paw. A heavy slap landed on Jiang Yu's face, and she looked at the cold man beside her with stars in her eyes. You, what are you doing? Jing Lai stared coldly at Jiang Yu's red and swollen face. You deliberately approached me because of Shao Wan. Shao Wan. When Jiang Yu heard Jing Lai's name for Su Wan, she couldn't help but take a step back. Do you know Su Wan? More than know. Jing Lai raised an eyebrow at Jiang Yu. She is my savior. No, how could it be? You were deceived by her. She is the most vicious liar in the world. Oh. Jiang Yu's chin was suddenly pinched by Jing Lai. Jing Lai, who had been in the underworld since he was a child, his strength was by no means comparable to that of a playboy like Wenhao. Jiang Yu felt that her chin was about to be crushed, and Jing Lai still looked at her coldly. Who is the vicious liar? Who knows? In the Su family's villa, Su Wan and Su Rui's engagement ceremony has come to an end. Kiss. Kiss. The surroundings were surrounded by classmates and friends who came to watch the ceremony, and even the popular Xiao Yuni pushed all the announcements and came back from thousands of miles away to attend his brother's engagement ceremony. Su Haiqing, who was sitting in the main seat, also showed a smile that had not been seen for a long time. Even Wen Shu, who was next to him, looked much better today than usual. Su Rui, wearing an elegant and handsome white suit, gently embraced Su Wan's slender waist. Wife, I love you. Me too. Su Wan gently closed her eyes and felt Su Rui's gentle kiss. She couldn't help but raise her lips and silently contacted the headquarters in her mind. Mission 002 completed, request to return. That after the engagement ceremony, all the guests were sent away. Su Wan and Su Rui left the Su family. A few hours later, the two of them left the mission world one after another. Lost time and space. Su Rui came out of his mission cabin. Although he still didn't get a point, General Su still had a smile on his face, but this smile immediately disappeared after seeing an uninvited guest. Yun Sheng, who had been waiting for Su Rui, finally waited for Su Rui to leave the mission and return. Who knew that at the first sight of him, he felt that he was despised by the other party. Just now, he smiled so gently, but when he saw him, he immediately put away his smile with a cold face and whatnot. Yunxing asked himself that he was not so annoying. What's the matter? Su Rui came out of the connection cabin and looked at Yunxing doubtfully. Well, you'd better keep in mind the information that Su Ji gave you. Yunxing put the stack of information that Su Su gave him in Su Rui's hands, and then without waiting for Su Rui to ask, he quickly left. General Su looked at the information in his hands speechlessly. Rebirth Department, Qin Yu, Lin Ruo, Yi Kanhuan. Destruction Department, Yi Axian, Su Wan, Ding Jia. This is. Su Rui's face involuntarily became solemn after seeing Su Wan's name. This was obviously an internal information about the leaders of other departments. The information about each person was very detailed. Plane Destroyer, Number 2. Su Wan, the darkened from the collapsed plane, executor of the plane. Su Su, seeing the first line of Su Wan's information, Su Rui's eyes stayed on Su Su's name for a long time. Destroyer's headquarters. When Su Wan returned to Number 2 execution room, she did not check her points as usual. She first looked up the details of the world's mission and follow-up. Shortly after she and Su Rui left, Wen Shu also passed away. Su Haiqing used all his property for charity. He himself also left D City and went to the mountainous area where he first met Wen Shu to be a public welfare volunteer. Although Xiao Yuni's journey in the entertainment circle was not smooth, he still became the hottest star. In that flashy and complicated circle, he always maintained his purest original heart and never changed. Luo Yu was successfully admitted to be city's university and was destined to embark on the path of an official in the future, but Su Nuo chose a university in the south in the second year. Everyone has their own pursuits and dreams. They have never given up on pursuing. As for love, once they have loved, they will no longer have regrets. As for Jiang Yu, she has been pestering Jing Lai, wanting to prove to Jing Lai that she was the one who really saved him. It was also because of her persistent pestering that she finally angered Jing Lai, and her end can be imagined. Su Wan really doesn't understand this kind of person. Sometimes, meaningless explanations and entanglements will only make your life worse. Why can't some people figure it out? Let the past be the past. Chapter 159. Su Xiaowan, save me. Suwon had just exited from the number 2 warehouse and was about to check the task list when the door of number 2 execution room was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Ding Jijia rushed in and threw herself into Suwon's arms regardless of anything. Fortunately, Suwon dodged quickly and Ding Jijia pounced on empty air. Su Shaowon, Won. Ding Jijia looked at Suwon with a wronged expression. Ever since she found out that Suwon could also smile, Ding Jijia felt that it was necessary to communicate with comrade Suwon and promote the friendship between colleagues. What's the matter? Faced with Ding Jijia's sudden enthusiasm, Suwon could only accept her helplessness. Won. Ding Jijia pitifully looked at Suwon with her lowly face. You have to save me. Only you can help me. Sure enough, there must be a request when one is unaccountably solicitous. What is it? Although Suwon wasn't familiar with the people in the department, her character wasn't cold. Help me with a task. Ding Jijia opened her communicator and directly pulled out a task. This baby has completed this task 3 times. 3 times. Su Shaowon, can you do it? This is the most difficult female lead I've ever seen. I beg you to help me eliminate her. No, help me convert her. This baby has already used all the techniques I have, snatched her man and killed her close friend. Your mother, in the end, she's still willing to block the knife for me. I'm really drunk. I'm really afraid that if I continue to do this task, one day, I'll be converted by her. Ah. Hearing Ding Jijia's words, Suwon's face also flashed with a hint of playfulness. How powerful was the female lead that could force Ding Jijia to this state? This woman's holy aura is definitely max. Su Shaowon, Won, just agree. Ding Jijia saw that Suwon seemed to be somewhat moved and immediately blinked her big eyes pitifully. Okay, send the task to me. I'll take a look. If there's a suitable identity, I'll take it. Yes, there's definitely a suitable role for you. Seeing that Suwon agreed, Ding Jijia immediately excitedly sent the mission information to Suwon's communicator. Ding Jijia was also very clear about Suwon's mission requirements. First, the character's identity must be an ex-girlfriend. Second, before entering the mission, the character cannot have an overly intimate relationship with anyone in the original world. In Ding Jijia's eyes, such a request was simply ridiculous. Fortunately, there was an important storyline character in this world that completely fulfilled these 2 requirements. Roughly skimming through the plot, Suwon nodded. Okay, I'll accept this mission. Thank you, moi. Ding Jijia stepped forward and tiptoed, wanting to kiss Suwon's face. In the end, Suwon dodged it again. Ding Jijia, sob. I feel like Suwon dislikes me. Please comfort me. Seeing that Suwon had accepted the mission and entered the connection cabin, Ding Jijia was still standing in the number 2 passage room, reluctant to part. Hey, when can I do missions here? It was said that number 2 was much more comfortable than number 3. Just as Ding Jijia was looking at the connection pod with envy, her communicator's locator suddenly began to flicker. Oh my, the male god finally did a mission. Ding Jijia immediately turned on the locator's plane lock function excitedly, and then there was no then. Looking at Suwon's connection pod, Ding Jijia looked at the plane signal on her locator with a look of astonishment. The male god entered the mission world. That world was originally her mission, but just now, she transferred it to Suwon. Ding Jijia. No one persuade me, let me cry quietly for a while. Mission world. Suwon's consciousness was linked to the body of the mission target. For a moment, her consciousness was blurred and she only felt cold all over. It's so cold. She unconsciously murmured. At this time, a warm body suddenly hugged her tightly. Shaowon, you bear with it will be fine after tonight. The voice was a weak female voice, very light and pleasant to listen to. Suwon slowly opened her eyes. It was pitch black in front of her, and she could only see the vague outline beside her in the haze. "This is Sister Yunua," Su Wan called out softly. Hearing her voice, Yen Yunua couldn't help but look down at the person in her arms. "I'm here, Xiao Wan, what's wrong?" "It's nothing, it's still a little cold," Su Wan replied in a low voice. She just wanted to confirm if the person who was hugging her in the cold night was the female lead. "Still cold." When Yen Yunua heard Su Wan's words, she couldn't help but let go of her hands and directly took off the palace-made uniform on her body. "For you." She wrapped Su Wan's whole body with her robe, and then opened her arms to hold Su Wan tightly in her arms. On a cold night, on a quiet and remote palace road, two young palace maids knelt on the imperial road, quietly hugging each other. Okay, it's not cold like this," Yen Yunua whispered to herself, her tone was still so soft. It was indeed a lot warmer. Su Wan gently closed her eyes and began to sort out the plot of this world. The female lead of this world was Yen Yunua, who was next to her. Yen Yunua was not called Yen Yunua. She was originally just a maid of Jinzhou's Yen family. It coincided with the imperial palace's triennial selection of palace family members to enter the palace. The Yen family originally had 2 places, but the Yen family's daughter was unwilling to enter the palace. Later, Master Yen bribed the officials in charge of the selection of palace family members and sent his unfavored concubine daughter, Yen Yuqing, and the female lead, who changed her name to Yen Yunua, into the palace. The new palace family members who entered the palace were only 13 years old, which was the age where they were ignorant of worldly affairs. Everyone was uniformly arranged to be in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, under the unified management and guidance of the nanny in charge. In a brand new and unfamiliar environment, although Yen Yuqing and Yen Yunua were not biological sisters, they still depended on each other. The relationship between the two people was closer than that of biological sisters. A year later, Yen Yuqing and Yen Yunua were assigned to different places by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Because Yen Yunua had been a maid since she was a child, her needlework and embroidery were very outstanding, so she was directly sent to the Shangfu Bureau. She was usually responsible for the selection of embroidery patterns, the rotation of the palace clothes for the 4 seasons, and other work. Yen Yuqing, who had not been favored in the Yen family since she was a child, was directly sent to the Shangfu Bureau because she was eloquent and good at coaxing people. Then, she was arranged to serve a nobleman who had just entered the palace. The lives of the 2 sisters began to take a turn at this time. Yen Yunua had a docile personality. She had been particularly gentle, honest, and willing to help others since she was a child. In the Shangfu Bureau, the competition between the new and old palace maids was very fierce. Because Yunua was obedient and diligent, she was highly regarded by Master Liao in the bureau, which brought her a lot of trouble. At this time, Yen Yunua, who was in deep trouble, received help from another palace maid. This palace maid was Su Wan, who entered the palace with her. Su Wan was from the capital and her family was originally a scholarly family. How could it be that when it reached her father's generation, because old man Su was addicted to gambling, his family declined and he also owed others a huge amount of money. Unable to repay, her father had no choice but to sell her into the palace. Su Wan and Yen Yunua were assigned to the Shangfu Bureau together. The 2 people did not have any intersection at first, but Su Wan couldn't bear to see others always bullying Yen Yunua, and Yen Yunua was honest and always silently enduring, so Su Wan began to help Yen Yunua. When she was bullied, she helped her fight back together. Later, the 2 people slowly became very good sisters. After Su Wan became friends with Yen Yunua, she told Yen Yunua about her life experience and worries. It turned out that before the Su family declined, Father Su had set a marriage for Su Wan. After the Su family declined, the marriage was no longer mentioned. Who knew that after Su-won entered the palace, she would accidentally meet her fiancé, Shin Xingbei. The Shin family was also a rising star in the capital. Shin Xingbei had just turned 16 years old and entered the palace to become a royal guard as soon as he reached adulthood. It could be said that his future was limitless. The two people were childhood sweethearts when they were young. Although they hadn't seen each other for many years, by chance, Shin Xingbei met someone from the Shangfu Bureau when he was patrolling in the imperial city. He recognized Su-won's jade pendant in the crowd, and later, he asked someone to send a letter to Su-won. Su-won, who received the letter, was naturally very happy. She also wrote a reply to Shin Xingbei, but she couldn't find someone who could help her deliver the letter. At this time, Yan Yunhua remembered Yan Yuqing. Yan Yuqing was assigned to Lu Guiren's palace as a servant. Lu Guiren was favored at this time, and Yan Yuqing was appreciated by Lu Guiren because of her eloquence. As the saying goes, when a man achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs also rise to heaven. When Lu Guiren was favored, the palace servants in her palace also followed suit. Yan Yunhua introduced Su-won to Yan Yuqing, and the three people immediately became sworn sisters. According to age, Yan Yunhua was the elder sister, Yan Yuqing was the second sister, and Su-won was the youngest third sister. Yan Yuqing was naturally very attentive in doing things for her third sister, so Su-won began to write letters to Shin Xingbei. Originally, the two people had agreed that when Su-won entered the palace for 3 years, when it was time to leave the palace, Shin Xingbei would spend money to find someone to let her leave the palace and tie the knot with him. But in the second year after Su-won entered the palace, Yan Yuqing was visited by the emperor and was later conferred the title of beauty. Yan Yuqing, who had an unstable foundation in the palace, naturally wanted to find a loyal and reliable candidate for her own use. She originally took a fancy to Yan Yunhua, but Yan Yunhua was too honest. Yan Yuqing, who had long learned how to survive in the palace from Lu Guiren, finally chose Su-won. After Su-won followed Yan Yuqing, she saw Yan Yuqing being favored step by step, from beauty to concubine. She received all the favor and also received very rich rewards. Those precious snow satin, ginseng, and emerald pearls, which one of them wasn't hard to find? Slowly, Su-won's heart also began to change. She had seen the current emperor in Yan Yuqing's palace. A young and handsome emperor, who wouldn't be tempted? Because of her own thoughts, Su-won began to alienate Shin Xingbei. She never read or replied to Shin Xingbei's letters, and she even wrote a heartless letter to Yan Yunhua to help her hand it over to Shin Xingbei. At this time, Yan Yunhua had already gained a foothold in the Shangfu Bureau. She had also seen Shin Xingbei several times and knew that he was a good man who was infatuated with love. In fear that Shin Xingbei would be sad, Yan Yunhua left Su-won's heartless letter. She imitated Su-won's notes and continued to communicate with Shin Xingbei for more than a year. In the third year of entering the palace, Shin Xingbei had been promoted to the chief guard. He finally had the opportunity to patrol the palace at night. It was at that time that he met Su-won again and was even rejected by Su-won. At this time, Shin Xingbei knew that the person who had been communicating with him for more than a year turned out to be Yan Yunhua. Shin Xingbei was disappointed with Su-won's heartlessness. At the same time, he became good friends with Yan Yunhua because of her kindness, and even slowly fell in love with Yan Yunhua. At this time, Su-won was deliberately approaching the emperor, but who was Yan Yuqing? When she was still the steward of Lu Guiren's palace maid, she used her master's shoulder to climb onto the dragon bed. Now, she naturally wouldn't let herself repeat Lu Guiren's mistakes, so Su-won's dream of becoming an imperial concubine naturally fell through. She was even framed by another female official in the palace. After being beaten, she was dragged to the Zinzheku to do the dirtiest and most tiring things. Once she woke up from her dream, Su-won began to regret her past. She thought that she would be trapped in the dark Zinzheku for the rest of her life. Who knew that at this time, Yen Yunhua would stand up for her? Yen Yunhua used all her monthly salary and even asked Qin Xingbei to help. The two of them used silver to finally rescue Su Wan from the Zinzheku and arranged for her to work in the Shangshu Bureau. The work in the Shangshu Bureau was very easy. Su Wan was only responsible for lighting the lamps and even serving His Majesty and the Empress as they bathed and changed clothes. This was another good opportunity for Su Wan to get close to His Majesty. But at this time, Su Wan had already given up on the high-risk profession of Empress. She learned from Yen Yunhua that Qin Xingbei had put in a lot of effort to rescue her. Su Wan was moved and remembered his kindness. She decided to leave the palace in the future and live a good life with Qin Xingbei. Su Wan, who had already regarded Yen Yunhua as her best sister, told her thoughts. Yen Yunhua was happy for Su Wan, but she also felt a little sad. In fact, in the past days, she and Qin Xingbei were already in love with each other, but when she thought of Su Wan's suffering and her engagement with Qin Xingbei, Yen Yunhua felt that she should fulfill their wishes. As a result, Yen Yunhua began to deliberately be indifferent and alienate Qin Xingbei. She did not even hesitate to ruin her image in front of him, making him feel that she was a selfish and vicious woman. Unfortunately, at this time, Qin Xingbei was already deeply in love with her. How could he be deceived by Yen Yunhua's clumsy acting skills? Qin Xingbei decided to find Su Wan and lay his cards on the table, but Yen Yunhua refused no matter what. While the two people were pulling and pulling, they saw that Su Wan had already appeared behind them with a cold expression. Su Wan, who felt that she was deceived by her most trusted sister and her lover, couldn't accept this blow for a while. She accidentally knocked over the oil lamp when she was lighting the lamps that night and almost caused a big fire. After making such a big mistake, Su Wan should have been taken to the worship room to be punished, but she was taken directly to Xiuning Palace, where the noble imperial concubine Liang lived. Imperial concubine Liang entered the palace early and was of noble birth, but she had never been favored. Seeing that the newly entered palace's beautiful young mistress and those young and tender palace maids were all treated equally, Imperial concubine Liang sighed in her heart that she had passed away. For the sake of her and her family status, she began to look for outstanding candidates in the palace, wanting to train them into her own chess pieces and present them to His Majesty. And Su Wan was the person chosen by Imperial concubine Liang. At this time, Su Wan had great hatred for Yen Yunhua, Qin Xingbei, and even Yen Yuqing. Her desire to turn over and retaliate was particularly strong, so under Imperial concubine Liang's training, Su Wan successfully attracted the attention of His Majesty, Dongfang Yao, and after being visited, she was granted the title of nobility as she wished. With Imperial concubine Liang as her backing, Su Wan began to fight openly and covertly with Yen Yuqing. At the same time, she also constantly sent people to the Shangfu Bureau to find trouble with Yen Yunhua. Yen Yunhua was worthy of being the good holy mother of the great Shang dynasty. No matter what difficulties she encountered, she refused to bow her head. No matter what unfair treatment she encountered, she could clench her teeth and persevere, never resisting. Deep in the palace, another year passed in the blink of an eye. Both Su Wan and Yen Yuqing were pregnant. The flames of war between the two people escalated in order to have children. At this time, the two people who were fighting in full swing were harmed by another imperial concubine. The two people lost their children at the same time. Su Wan's health was extremely poor because she had a chronic illness in the Zinzheku. After an accident, she almost bled to death. Fortunately, the newly promoted imperial physician, Lu Mushuan, had superb medical skills and pulled her out of the line of life and death. At this time, Yen Yuqing still mistakenly thought that Su Wan was the mastermind behind the scenes. She began to collect evidence and complain in front of the emperor and the empress dowager. Because the evidence was conclusive, the crime of murdering the heir of the imperial family caused Su Wan to directly enter the cold palace. She was bedridden and had no one to rely on in the cold palace. At this time, Yen Yunhua appeared again, and she also brought Imperial physician Lu to help Su Wan see a doctor. This time, Su Wan, who didn't have long to live, truly saw through the illusions of riches and honor. She finally reconciled with Yen Yunhua on the hospital bed. Yen Yunhua versus Su Wan, the Holy Mother successfully subdued a vicious supporting female who abandoned darkness for light. Of course, this was only the first vicious supporting female that the Holy Mother saved on the road to the harem. After Su Wan was banished to the cold palace, the harem became the battlefield of Yan Yuqing and Jin Fei. It turned out that Lu Guiren once again entered the eyes of Dongfang Yao because of the song, Huainan Dream, and he was quickly upgraded to Jin Fei. At this time, Yan Yuqing also learned from the cold palace that Su Wan was really wronged. The mastermind behind the scenes who caused her to lose her child turned out to be the former Lu Guiren, the current Jin Fei. The two people could be said to be enemies, and when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Jin Fei learned that Yan Yuqing and Yen Yunhua were biological sisters, so she found someone to set up a trap to frame Yen Yunhua. As a result, Yen Yuqing beat her at her own game and put on a show in front of the emperor. This allowed Yen Yuqing to smoothly gain the emperor's love and trust, but at the same time, it also let the emperor get to know Yen Yunhua. Yen Yunhua's kindness and sincerity made Dongfang Yao, who grew up in the imperial city and was accustomed to deception, feel that it was very precious, so he transferred Yen Yunhua to his side to be the imperial attendant. Since Yen Yunhua's promotion, her status in the harem has risen, and she has also received infinite malice from various concubines. Fortunately, Yen Yunhua has always been in line with the principle of having a clear conscience, contentment, and doing good deeds without leaving a name. In danger again and again, she successfully averted danger and even saved two concubines who had fallen out of favor. At this time, Yen Yunhua was already a popular person around the emperor, and even Dongfang Yao had slowly fallen in love with this personal palace maid who accompanied him. Unfortunately, he knew a long time ago that Yen Yunhua liked Qin Xingbei. As an emperor, he didn't want his beloved woman to be trapped in the bloodless battlefield of the harem for a lifetime. Dongfang Yao had the intention to fulfill Yen Yunhua's wish, but who knew that at this time, Yan Yuqing, who had a deep sisterly relationship with Yen Yunhua on the surface, would suddenly make a move. In order not to let Yen Yunhua take the emperor away from her, Yan Yuqing arranged a scene to set up Yen Yunhua and Lu Mushuan. Lu Mushuan had long been in love with Yen Yunhua. The two often met in the inner palace, but they had always been close friends. After being framed by Yen Yuqing, the two people were given a powerful aphrodisiac and locked in an empty palace. In order to protect the innocence of his beloved, Lu Mushuan did not hesitate to harm himself. In the end, although the two people were found in time by the emperor, Lu Mushuan was unconscious because of excessive blood loss, and Yen Yunhua, who was also affected by the aphrodisiac, was immediately carried by Dongfang Yao to the imperial hospital for treatment. Afterwards, Dongfang Yao immediately sent someone to investigate the matter thoroughly. Yen Yuqing saw that her affairs had been exposed, and she couldn't help but run to Yen Yunhua's sickbed and plead bitterly. Yen Yunhua, who had always been kind-hearted, naturally believed Yen Yuqing's words. She pleaded for her sister in front of the emperor with her sick body, and Yen Yuqing was exempted from punishment. After this incident, although Yen Yuqing was not banished to the cold palace, she was demoted from Duan Fei to Duan Pin, and since then, she has completely lost Dongfang Yao's favor. Yen Yuqing, who had been a concubine's daughter since childhood and had never been willing to bow her head to her fate, still refused to admit defeat at this time. Without the emperor's favor, she unexpectedly gained the favor of Rui Wang Dongfangli. Dongfangli was the son of the former emperor's imperial brother and the cousin of the current emperor. He seemed to be a playboy, but in fact, he was extremely ambitious. Dongfangli, who wanted to seize the throne, took advantage of Yen Yuqing's disfavor to get close to her. He used feelings as bait to slowly conquer Yan Yuqing's heart. After she was dead set on him, he began to instruct Yan Yuqing to tamper with the emperor's food and drink. At this time, because Yan Yuqing was not favored, there were naturally no informants around her, which became the best opportunity for her to make a move. Within a few days, Dongfang Yao was poisoned into a coma and all the evidence pointed to Yan Yunhua as the murderer who poisoned the emperor. Yan Yunhua, who was framed and imprisoned, was waiting to be beheaded in prison. At this time, Yan Yuqing finally couldn't help going to the prison to show off her strength. At the same time, Dongfang Li took advantage of Dongfang Yao's poisoning to premeditate a coup d'état. At the critical moment, Lu Muxuan tested the poison with his own body and successfully rescued Dongfang Yao. At this time, Qin Xingbei also brought the elite guards to the rescue. Dongfang Li's palace coup d'état failed and was sent to prison. Yan Yunhua's grievances were cleared and she was released from prison. After she was released from prison, Dongfang Yao rewarded her according to her merits and personally betrothed Qin Xingbei and Yan Yunhua in marriage. At this time, because she heard Yan Yuqing's repentance in prison and saw her extremely embarrassed situation, Yan Yunhua, who was once again moved with compassion, once again pleaded for Yan Yuqing in front of Dongfang Yao. "Holy Mother, you are really enough." For the sake of Yan Yunhua's face, Dongfang Yao once again pardoned Yan Yuqing's death sentence, but changed her to a temple for a lifetime of cultivation. On the day that Yan Yuqing was released from prison and left the capital, Yan Yunhua personally saw her off outside the capital. It was thought that the two sisters were reluctant to part, but who knew that Yan Yuqing, who had already lost her mind and fell into madness, suddenly pulled out a dagger from her cuff and stabbed it at Yan Yunhua's chest. At the critical moment, Qin Xingbei turned around and held Yan Yunhua in his arms, blocking a fatal knife for her. Afterwards, Yan Yuqing committed suicide and although the seriously injured Qin Xingbei was rescued by Lu Muxuan, he could no longer practice martial arts and lead troops in this life. The plot ended here. Qin Xingbei resigned and returned to her hometown of Jinzhou with Yan Yunhua. The two lived a happy life where the man farmed and the woman weaved. Is this the so-called happy ending? Happy ending your sister's husband. Let's not talk about how many innocent palace maids and eunuchs were cannon fodder in Holy Mother Yan's harem promotion record. Let's talk about the two men, Qin Xingbei and Lu Muxuan. One mutilated himself and tested poison for her. A young and promising great imperial doctor eventually became a sickly person who couldn't stop taking medicine, and the other was a great general who should have commanded thousands of troops to serve the country, but in the end, because of her, he became a third-class disability who couldn't lift his hand. Female lead, you have the world in your heart, you have a compassionate heart, you save all living beings, you don't cheat others, you only cheat your own man. After Su Wan lit a candle for the male lead and supporting male in her heart, she couldn't help but mutter in her heart. In this world, when it comes to affectionate supporting males, it would be Lu Muxuan and Dongfang Yao. If Su Rui enters this mission world, what will his identity be? If it's Lu Muxuan, it's fine, but if it's Dongfang Yao who has 3,000 beauties, Chapter 160. In the late autumn morning, the sky was gray and a thin layer of white frost had condensed on the red brick imperial road. "Sister, wake up." Her stiff body was pushed a few times and Su Wan's consciousness gradually became sober. She slowly opened her eyes and saw a young palace maid wearing a cyan palace dress. This was the little palace maid who got up early in the morning to clean the imperial road. Such a palace maid had no rank, and her status was only higher than the slave palace maids of the laundry bureau and Zinteku. When the little palace maid saw Su Wan wake up, she immediately lowered her head and became docile. "Sister, it's dawn. Are you people from the 6th bureau? The sister next to me seems to have a fever." I called her for a long time, but she didn't respond. Su Wan had just moved her stiff limbs at this time. When she heard the words of the little palace maid, she remembered Yan Yunhua next to her. Yen Yunua's robe was still on her body. Now she was only wearing a thin inner garment. Her whole body was frozen and her face showed a strange red color. Oh no! Su Wan immediately struggled to stand up. At this moment, she remembered the plot she was experiencing now. It was in the original plot when she and Yen Yunhua were framed by those old palace maids in the Shangfu Bureau. The two of them sent flower patterns to Empress Shu to choose from yesterday. As a result, those flower patterns were secretly cut. Empress Shu was angry and punished the two of them to kneel outside her Jingyun palace for a night. Because she knelt all night, Su Wan couldn't exert any strength after standing up, and her hands and feet were stiff. She tried to support Yen Yunhua and failed several times. In desperation, Su Wan had to look up at the little palace maid beside her. "What is your name?" Replying to sister, this servant's name is Bingyue. Bingyue also looked to be 13 or 14 years old. The little girl looked quite clever. Su Wan's eyes flashed. "Bingyue, do you know Imperial Physician Liu in the Imperial Hospital?" Imperial Physician Liu. Bingyue's eyes turned. Is sister talking about Imperial Physician Liu Mushuan? Liu Mushuan was young, handsome, and had superb medical skills. Because he often went in and out of the harem to treat the Empress Dowager and various concubines, most of the palace maids in the harem recognized him. It is Imperial Physician Liu Mushuan. I don't have any strength now. Bingyue, help me carry her to Imperial Physician Liu. We are very familiar with Imperial Physician Liu. Su Wan also didn't know if Su Rui had already entered the mission at this time, and was his identity Liu Mushuan or Dongfang Yao. Now that Yen Yunhua had a fever like this, Su Wan had no time to think about it. She could only find someone to treat her as soon as possible. If the female lead Darren's brain was burned, then what kind of mission would she be able to do? Bingyue hesitated. As the lowest-ranked palace maid, she was naturally willing to be on good terms with the high-ranked palace maids. But the Imperial Hospital wasn't a place anyone could enter. What if, Bingyue, don't tell me you want to keep cleaning the Imperial Road. Seeing Bingyue's hesitation, Su Wan couldn't help but whisper, as long as you help me, I won't treat you unfairly. Hearing Su Wan's promise, Bingyue bit her lips and hesitated. In the end, she looked up at Su Wan's face and said, "Okay. Sister, let me help you." As she spoke, she quickly stepped forward and supported Yen Yunhua, who was already somewhat unconscious, from the other side. The two people walked all the way in the direction of the Imperial Hospital. At this time, the sky was not yet bright. In the entire palace, except for the people who were cleaning the Imperial Road early in the morning, there were almost no other figures. In fact, Liu Mushuan was not always in the Imperial Hospital. Sometimes he would stay directly in the Imperial Hospital if he had to see patients overnight, and sometimes if there was nothing going on in the harem, he would leave the palace and go back to his own house. Su Wan was thinking about the possibility of Su Rui being Liu Mushuan along the way. Until she and Bingyue arrived outside the Imperial Hospital, the two people were directly stopped by the servant at the entrance of the hospital. The Imperial Hospital is an important place, no one is allowed to enter without permission. Two sisters, do you have the jade card to enter and exit the palace? The manservant at the door stopped the two of them and asked respectfully. He had been guarding the Imperial Hospital for a few months. He knew almost all the first-class palace maids and female officials who served the concubines. Now that he saw the person in front of him was rather unfamiliar, he naturally had to ask about it according to the rules. We are looking for Imperial Physician Liu. Is Imperial Physician Liu here? Su Wan glanced at the servant at the door and asked faintly. Imperial Physician Liu hasn't gotten up yet. As the servant spoke, he looked at Su Wan and then looked at Yen Yunhua, who was being supported by Su Wan and Bingyue. This sister seems to have a high fever. If you don't have the Master's Jade card, you can go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The Ministry of Internal Affairs in the imperial city was in charge of the food and drink of all the servants in the palace, as well as their monthly salaries and daily necessities. If the palace maids and servants were sick or injured, they could also go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to spend money to see a doctor. This little brother, we are Imperial Physician Lu's fellow countrymen. When Su-won heard the servant's words, she immediately raised her wrist, took out her purse from her sleeve and handed it over with a smile. Please go in and inform Imperial Physician Lu. Sorry for troubling you. This. The servant looked at the purse handed over by Su-won and hesitated for a moment. When he thought that Imperial Physician Lu was famous for his good temper, his eyes narrowed and he quickly took Su-won's purse. It turns out that elder sister is Imperial Physician Lu's fellow countryman. You should have said so earlier. This little one will go in and inform. As he spoke, the servant quickly turned around and entered the door of the Imperial Hospital. Not long after, he hurriedly rushed out again. Elder sisters, Imperial Physician Lu has just woken up, please come in. Su-won and Bingyue looked at each other and the two immediately helped Yen Yunhua into the Imperial Hospital. The entire courtyard was still filled with the faint fragrance of herbs. At this time, Yen Yunhua also regained some consciousness. She murmured and slowly opened her eyes. Seeing the unfamiliar scenery in front of her, Yen Yunhua frowned and her eyes were in a trance. It wasn't until she caught a glimpse of Su-won's face that her eyes lit up. Xiao-won, this is. Where are we going? Sister Yunhua, you have a fever, I brought you to see Imperial Physician Lu. Su-won saw that Yen Yunhua had woken up and couldn't help but whisper in her ear. Imperial Physician Lu. Isn't he the most famous one in the harem? No need, I'm fine. It just so happens that I'm off today. I'll go back and sleep. Xiao-won. To see the Imperial Physician, it costs a lot of money. Yen Yunhua had never been to the Imperial Hospital in the year she entered the palace, but she had heard a lot about the Imperial Hospital. This place was a place for the masters to see a doctor. She was just a palace maid, how could she afford it? Just as Yen Yunhua was struggling to turn around, Su-won and Bingyue had already entered the door, and a clear and melodious male voice was heard in the room. You are my fellow countrymen. The man's tone rose, but his tone was very gentle and did not seem particularly cold. Hearing that voice, Su-won abruptly raised her head. In the end, she saw a handsome young face. It's not Su-rui. Su-won's face immediately sank. So, Su-rui's identity in this world is the current emperor, Dongfang Yao. Zhonggong, Qinkuan Palace. Su-rui opened his eyes and the first thing he saw was the golden Nanmu bedpost carved with dragons and phoenixes. The luxurious and spacious palace was filled with the familiar smell of ambergris, and a soft, boneless body was wrapped around him like a snake. Feeling that there was another person on the bed, and it was a woman wearing nothing, Su-rui's face suddenly changed. Almost at the moment when his consciousness returned, he suddenly kicked the woman beside him off the bed. Aww. The still sleepy imperial concubine was kicked to the ground and she instantly woke up. Hearing the sound in the inner room, the chamberlain who had been guarding outside immediately rushed over. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! The long hair of the woman on the ground was disheveled, her seductive eyes looking at the beautiful and handsome face on the dragon bed, while the chamberlain on the side bent over, slightly raised his eyelids, and hesitantly looked at the man on the dragon bed. Get out! Su-rui's eyes were cold as he roared. The woman on the ground turned pale and looked at him with lustrous eyes. Your Majesty, this concubine, this concubine. This concubine didn't wear anything. Hearing the woman's voice, Su-rui's eyes darkened again. You don't want to get out? Then stay. Your Majesty. Hearing Su-rui's words, the imperial concubine's beautiful eyes flashed and she was about to smile charmingly at His Majesty. As a result, she saw the man on the dragon bed raise his hand and pull out the Emperor's sword that had been hanging on the left side of the dragon bed. The peerlessly sharp sword drew a cold light in the air and instantly penetrated her youthful and seductive body. An arrow pierced through the heart, without a drop of extra blood spilling out. It is said that accompanying the Emperor is like accompanying a tiger. The chamberlain on the side was indeed a senior talent who could move unhindered in the harem. Not only was he indifferent to the murder happening around him, but he also calmly bent over and slowly walked to the imperial concubine. He raised his hand to check her breath, reporting to Your Majesty, Yu Guiren offended the Emperor's face and has been executed. What's the use of one dead? General Su felt very sad. He swore to God that he didn't touch that woman at all. Even if they slept on the same bed, it was the original owner Dongfang Yao who had sex with her last night. His body and heart were innocent. Chapter 161. Seeing his master sitting on the dragon bed in a daze, the head chamberlain Wang Yi immediately directed the little eunuch behind him to carry Yu Guiren's body away, and then turned his head to instruct the palace maids on the side to clean up the ground. After silently finishing all this, Wang Yi bent over and moved to the dragon bed, picked up the bright yellow inner garment on the side and draped it over Su Rui's body. He pinched his throat and asked in a low voice, Your Majesty, do you want to take a bath and change clothes? It's almost time to go to the imperial court. Go to your sister's imperial court. Su Rui looked up at Wang Yi, and just one look made Wang Yi break out in a cold sweat. His ice-cold, deep, and gloomy eyes were like a cold lake, causing people to shrink back. Wang Yi trembled and took a few steps back, his body involuntarily bowing lower. Take a bath. After a long silence, Su Rui finally spoke in a low voice. When Wang Yi heard his master's voice, he immediately turned around and greeted the palace maids in the Qianquan palace with the things that had been prepared a long time ago. Su Rui on the dragon bed looked at the clothes belonging to Dongfang Yao and couldn't help but frown. When he raised his eyes again, a group of beautiful palace maids was already in front of him. Everyone retreat. General Su was angry again. Isn't this forcing people to make mistakes? Seeing the Emperor's anger, the palace maids on the side immediately trembled and all knelt down and retreated. On the side, Wang Yi's face, which had been pretending to be calm, finally showed a trace of panic. What's wrong with His Majesty today? How did that Yu Guiren provoke His Majesty? You see, His Majesty is so angry that everyone is not pleasing to the eye now. Wang Yi. Just as Wang Yi was secretly cursing, Su Rui had already sat up from the dragon bed. He pulled the inner garment draped over his shoulder and threw it to the ground in disgust. Everything, including this dragon bed, destroy it all for Jin. Also, immediately call the chamberlain to come in and help Jin bathe and change clothes. In the future, there will be no more palace maids in the Qianquan palace. Wang Yi. Terrible, terrible, could it be that His Majesty had been provoked by Yu Guiren to hate women? Hearing Su Rui's instructions, Wang Yi immediately turned around to execute, but his heart was already full of tears in the imperial hospital. In the clean and tidy room, Yan Yunhua leaned weakly on the bed, while Lu Mushuan sat on the yellow pearwood chair beside the bed, holding a silver needle in his hand, leaving needle holes on her white wrist. Yan Yunhua, who was not yet 15 years old, was sitting so close to a man for the first time in her life. Moreover, she had to roll up her sleeves in front of him and expose her white wrists. Such intimate contact made Yan Yunhua feel like her heart was pounding and her face was burning. Sister Yunhua's face seems to be even redder. Bingyue, who had been standing on the side, couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Yan Yunhua's red cheeks. Su Wan, Sister Frozen Moon, I know that you're actually trying to be familiar with us, but did you really not mean to yell like this? Hearing Bingyue's blabbermouth, Yan Yunhua immediately felt ashamed and subconsciously moved her arm. Don't move. A glimmer of light flashed in Lu Mushuan's eyes. His slender and clean fingers gently pressed on Yan Yunua's arm. A slightly hot electric current came from his fingertips, making Yan Yunua's whole body stiffen, not daring to move. Catching a glimpse of the smile that flashed across Lu Mushuan's lips, Su Wan, who was not far away, also slightly raised the corner of her lips. She seemed to have accidentally paired Imperial Physician Lu and the female lead Darren together. And, speaking of which, first come, first served is really a lot of knowledge. In the original plot, Imperial Physician Lu lost because he appeared too late. After a while, it's done. Lu Mushuan put away the silver needles and gently and carefully helped Yan Yunua smooth her sleeves. I will prescribe you medicine again. You have to take it on time after you go back so that the cold energy in your body will be completely removed. Seeing Lu Mushuan turn to write a prescription on the wooden table on the side, Yan Yunua bit her lip and looked at Lu Mushuan's thin back for the first time. She weakly opened her mouth and said, Imperial Physician Lu, the consultation fee. How much is the consultation fee? Asking about the consultation fee, Yan Yunua was obviously not confident. She subconsciously touched the purse around her waist, which contained the monthly payment she had just received this month. Consultation fee. After writing the last word of the prescription, Lu Mushuan turned to look at Su Wan, who had been standing silently not far away. Your little sister has already paid the consultation fee for you. Xiao Wan. Yan Yunua's eyes immediately fell on Su Wan. She knew the situation of Su Wan's family. Now Father Su still owed a lot of money, but she was even poorer than herself. It's okay, Sister Yunua. Imperial Physician Lu is a famous philanthropist. He treats people very cheaply. I still have money left over from the money I gave him. Seeing Yan Yunua looking at her, Su Wan immediately whispered with a smile on her face. She couldn't help but take a step forward, raised her little hand and waved in front of Lu Mushuan. Imperial Physician Lu, change. Ah. Lu Mushuan smiled gently and turned his eyes to the door. Fu Lu, change for the patient. When the servant named Fu Lu heard Lu Mushuan's call, he immediately lowered his head and walked to Su Wan with a red face. Sister, your change. As he spoke, he reluctantly stuffed all the silver that Su Wan had given him not long ago back into Su Wan's palm. It's too much. Su Wan bent her eyes and stuffed half of the broken silver back into Fu Lu's hand. Your name is Fu Lu. In the future, pay more attention to Imperial Physician Lu. Do good deeds and you will be rewarded. Be a good person, do good deeds, and you will be rewarded. Hearing Su Wan's words, Fu Lu immediately looked at her with sparkling eyes and a face full of excitement. Su Wan, don't thank elder sister, please call elder sister Holy Mother Su. That's right, after Su Wan entered the mission, she had already thought of a super good idea that completely beat Holy Mother Yan. When you meet a pear blossom in the rain, please don't be careless and be more pitiful than her. When you meet a good Holy Mother who returns evil with good, then please be bold and rest assured to help her. Let her feel that your whole body is full of positive energy. Su Wan has always believed that negative is positive. When two Holy Mothers walk together, it's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. In short, for this mission, Su Wan decided to fight. I'll go. Just as Su Wan was about to help Yan Yunua leave, a panting figure yelled and rushed into Lu Mushuan's room. After entering the room, the person quickly patted his small chest, raised his phoenix eyes, and quickly swept his gaze across the room. Yan Yunua, Su Wan. You two, really tired Zajia to death. Chen Gonggong. This person was none other than the steward of the Shangfu Bureau, Chen Ji. At this time, Chen Ji saw that Yan Yunua and Su Wan still wanted to salute him. He immediately waved his small hand and stepped forward to grab both of their hands. You two. Come back to the Shangfu Bureau with me. You guys are in trouble this time, in big trouble. What big trouble? Hearing Chen Ji's words, Yan Yunua's face changed, and Bingyue, who was originally following behind the two people, took 2 steps back without a trace, keeping a certain distance from the two people. The atmosphere in the room was a little tense and depressing for a while. Lu Mushuan kept his eyes down, seemingly indifferent, but in fact, he had been waiting for Chen Ji to continue. It's His Majesty, he. As soon as Chen Ji mentioned His Majesty, his androgynous little face immediately turned pale. His Majesty is in the Shangfu Bureau, killed a lot of people. At the thought of the scene of blood flowing like a river, Chen Ji felt his stomach tremble. On the way here, he also saw corpses rolled up with mats coming in and out of the Jingyun Palace's palace gate. That blood, dark red, that horrifying awe. In short, early this morning, His Majesty was furious for some reason. First, he stabbed Yu Guiren to death with a sword, then he ordered Xu Fei's death and massacred the Jingyun Palace. Now, isn't it the Shangfu Bureau's turn now? Coincidentally, most of the people in the Shangfu Bureau were here today, but Su Wan and Yan Yunhua were missing. Chen Ji simply didn't dare to think about it anymore. These 2 little girls were probably doomed today and it would be hard for them to escape death. His Majesty killed people in the Shangfu Bureau. Hearing Chen Ji's words, Yan Yunhua's legs softened. What about Liao Si? Is Liao Si okay? The Holy Mother really put others before herself, making Su Wan unable to catch up to her awe. It seems that this fake Holy Mother still needs to continue to work hard. But His Majesty. Isn't it General Su? Chapter 162. Su Wan and Yan Yunhua followed behind Chen Ji and almost ran straight from the Imperial Hospital to the Shangfu Bureau. Before they reached the door, they saw a group of servants carrying a blood-dripping mat coming out of the palace gate of the Shangfu Bureau. Ah! Yan Yunhua tightly covered her mouth and turned her face in horror. Her whole body leaned in front of Su Wan, and her other hand did not forget to cover Su Wan's eyes with a trembling hand. She had been in the palace for more than a year. Although she had long heard that people's lives were like grass in the depths of the palace, it was really the first time that Yan Yunhua had seen such a scene. At this time, the servant carrying the blood-stained mat just walked to the side of the 3 people. The blood-stained mat suddenly scattered for some reason, and a bloody arm suddenly drooped down weakly. Ah! Yan Yunhua screamed again, and her originally pale little face was now bloodless. Who is making noise here? At this time, Wang Yi, who was wearing the chief eunuch uniform, walked out of the palace gate with a cold face and a horsetail whisk in his hand. That pair of indifferent eyes directly fell on Su Wan and Yan Yunhua. This slave deserves to die, this slave deserves to die. Yan Yunhua panicked and immediately pulled Su Wan to kneel on the ground, her teeth chattering. Steward Wang. At this time, Chen Ji staggered to the front of Wang Yi and said in a low voice while saluting, Steward Wang, the 2 of them are Yan Yunhua and Su Wan of the Shangfu Bureau. This little girl is timid, don't be angry. Ah. Oh. When Wang Yi heard Chen Ji's report, his eyes flickered slightly as he looked at the 2 women. These 2 little palace maids looked like they had just entered the palace not long ago. They looked to be 14 or 15 years old, and they both looked upright and delicate, but since the people have been found, hurry up and report to His Majesty. Don't just stand there and kneel, hurry up and catch up with Chen Ji. After saying that, Wang Yi couldn't help but use his horsetail whisk to fiercely hit Chen Ji. As a chamberlain, he must learn to figure out the emperor's intentions. Although His Majesty did not say much in the Shangfu Bureau, Wang Yi had long seen that His Majesty seemed to be specifically looking for these 2 little palace maids. Seeing that Chen Ji had not returned for a long time, His Majesty had become more and more irritable. Seeing this scene, Wang Yi took the initiative to volunteer to look for them. He did not expect that he would meet the main character as soon as he arrived at the palace gate. Chen Ji's expression changed when he was struck by Wang Yi's horsetail whisk, and he couldn't help but speed up his footsteps. He knew that Manager Wang was reminding him that His Majesty had been waiting impatiently since a long time ago, and if he was a few steps slower, he might lose his head. Fuck, for the sake of the head on my neck, I have to run as fast as I can. You too, hurry up if you don't want to die. As Chen Ji ran, he did not forget to look back at Su Wan and Yan Yunhua and shouted a few words in a low voice. Encountering such a big thing, his legs were already weak. How could he run? Yan Yunhua tightly held Su Wan's small hand beside her, her lips trembling slightly. Xiao Wan, don't be afraid, it's okay. His Majesty is wise, he won't kill the innocent. She was so scared that she couldn't walk, but Yan Yunhua did not forget to comfort Su Wan beside her. Although Su Wan's face was also pale, there was no trace of fear in her eyes. Instead, a trace of profound craftiness flashed across her eyes. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Chen Ji hadn't even entered the door when he bent over and shouted while sprinting. He prostrated himself on the ground and slid to the center of the main hall. This job, this proficiency, this posture, this perfection, really worthy of being the successor carefully cultivated by Wang Yi. Your Majesty, this slave has found the person. Chen Ji had been bending over and lowering his head since he entered the door. At this time, as he spoke, he secretly gestured to Su Wan and Yan Yunhua with his left hand behind him. You two still haven't come in to greet His Majesty. This slave greets His Majesty, long live His Majesty. Su Wan and Yan Yunhua knelt on the ground and bowed their heads to greet His Majesty. At this time, on the embroidered couch in the center of the palace, Su Rui was wearing a black dragon robe embroidered with gold. His heavy gaze instinctively fell on Su Wan, your mother. General Su wanted to cry but had no tears. In the previous world, his wife was at least a 17-year-old female high school student. What was she trying to do by turning into a 14-year-old little loli this time? Well, although General Su's previous world was also full of early marriages and early childbearing, after all, he had been to so many worlds and his thinking had changed a lot. I am now a law-abiding youth who loves small animals and looks at the traffic lights when crossing the road, okay? What lolicon, and in fact, Su Wan's current appearance is also quite cute. Su Rui kept staring at Su Wan in a daze. As a result, the air in the entire hall froze. No one dared to take a deep breath. Everyone lowered their heads and dared not make any movements, for fear of disturbing His Majesty and dying without an intact corpse. In short, His Majesty was too terrifying today. It was better for everyone to pretend to be dead. Time passed minute by minute. When Su Wan's legs were numb from kneeling, Su Rui, who was on the brocade couch, finally reacted. With a handsome face, he looked at Su Wan and Yan Yunhua in the main hall. As palace servants of the Shangfu Bureau, you actually left your post without permission. Do you two know your crime? Although his voice was still so cold, Su Rui's tone was obviously much gentler. Your Majesty. Seeing that the Emperor was going to punish them, Yan Yunhua immediately raised her head nervously. She couldn't let Su Wan be punished with her. After all, Su Wan left her post without permission to treat her. Even if she was going to be beheaded, Yan Yunhua didn't want to implicate other innocent people. Thinking of this, her gaze gradually became firm and her heart didn't seem to be so afraid. Your Majesty, everything is, it's this slave's fault. Su Wan suddenly spoke before Yan Yunhua. Your Majesty, everything is this slave's idea. Please punish me, Your Majesty. It's you. Su Rui's eyes flashed and he looked at Su Wan with a slightly profound look. No, it's not. Your Majesty is actually. Shut up. Seeing that Yen Yunhua was going to take over him again, Su Rui couldn't bear it and interrupted her. Didn't he go through so much trouble just to find an opportunity to be alone with his wife for a while? Female lead, what are you doing? Can you still make people fall in love happily? Feeling Su Rui's anger, everyone in the room knelt on the ground in fear. Your Majesty, please calm down. When the Emperor is angry, millions of corpses will be laid. This is definitely not a joke. Everyone retreat. Su Wan, you stay. Su Rui, who was on the couch, took the opportunity to wave his sleeves. Hearing His Majesty speak, the rest of the people in the Shangfu Bureau breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. Everyone wished they could grow 2 more legs so that they could run out immediately. Everyone else quickly retreated, only Yen Yunhua was still kneeling in the same place. Her face was unafraid of death. It was as if she wanted to die together with Su Shaowan. No, it was the rhythm of living and dying together. Seeing that the female lead was so sentimental and righteous, General Su's face became even more gloomy. Get out. The word go hadn't fallen yet when Yen Yunhua felt a gust of wind rushing towards her chest. Then her thin and weak body immediately flew out of the hall like a kite with a broken string, and the palace gate also closed without any wind at this time. Hello, Holy Mother Yen. Goodbye, Holy Mother Yen. The whole world was finally quiet. Su Rui smiled with satisfaction, but the smile on his face froze on his lips in the next second. Su Wan, who was originally kneeling on the ground, stood up at this time. Rubbing her numb knees, Su Wan walked step by step to the brocade couch with a smile. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. You are really awe-inspiring, Su Rui. Your Majesty's dragon robe is also very beautiful. Seeing that Su Rui didn't speak, Su Wan continued to smile. Her slender, white, and tender little fingers gently swept over Su Rui's dragon robe, and then her eyes fell on Su Rui's 9 dragons jade belt. The sewing of this belt is also first class. I heard that it was personally embroidered with gold thread by Yunfei Nyang, who is the best at needlework. What the hell is Yunfei? Su Rui's face stiffened. His slender and powerful arm pulled hard and pulled the thin and petite Su Shaowan into his arms. Wife, don't laugh. I'm panicking just looking at you. Listen to my explanation. Su Wan, who was sitting in Su Rui's arms, suddenly wrinkled her nose and sniffed him hard. So fragrant, this fragrance seems to be. Wife, I was wrong. General Su wanted to cry. Before the court session, His Majesty the Emperor had already taken several baths, okay? And after the court session, His Majesty the Emperor, who loves his wife as much as his life, first killed his way to Jingyun Palace, and then killed his way to the Shangfu Bureau, killing all the people who caused his wife to suffer. Where is the fragrance coming from now? It's clearly the smell of blood. Hearing Su Rui take the initiative to admit his mistake, Su Wan's drooping eyes flashed with a smile, but the expression on her face was still like a smile yet not a smile. Your Majesty, you hold life and death in your hands. You can turn your hand and call the clouds and cover your hand and call the rain. How could you be wrong? Su Rui. Not just when Su Rui was full of powerlessness and felt that he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River this time, Su Wan, who was in his arms, suddenly turned around, a pair of arms wrapped around Su Rui's body, and her pink and sparkling lips smacked on his lips. Happiness came too suddenly. When Su Rui reacted, Su Wan, who was in his arms, was already trembling with laughter. Okay, you played with me. His Majesty the Emperor, who was slow on the uptake, finally put down the boulder in his heart. His handsome face also had a bit of a relaxed smile. Wife, you're not angry. You really scared me to death. That's why it's said that henpecked and henpecked are a group of very simple creatures. You think you've smoothly passed. Chapter 163. The door of the Shangfu Bureau's main hall had been closed, and no one knew what happened inside. Ever since Yan Yunhua was swept out of the main hall by Su Rui's internal energy, she was in a state of stupefaction. At this time, her heart was full of concern for Su Wan's safety. After entering the palace for more than a year, Yan Yunhua had long been accustomed to being bullied, and she was also used to subconsciously protecting Yan Yuqing when she encountered anything. In Yan Yunhua's heart, Yan Yuqing was originally her master, and now she was her younger sister. It was a matter of course for her to protect her and even suffer for her. Since Yan Yunhua entered the Shangfu Bureau and separated from Yan Yuqing, she met Su Wan again. From the beginning of their acquaintance, Su Wan had been helping her, and the two had been supporting each other. Yan Yunhua was a few months older than Su Wan. She felt that she should treat Yan Yuqing the same way she treated Yan Yuqing, protecting Su Wan and everything about her, but today. Yunhua. Liao Si, dressed in a brocade dress, stood behind Yan Yunhua at some point. Seeing her worried look, Liao Si couldn't help but pat her on the shoulder. Yunhua, don't worry, Su Wan should be fine. As she spoke, Liao Si's eyes couldn't help but look at the closed palace door. She clearly remembered that when His Majesty first arrived at the Shangfu Bureau, he killed several people without saying a word. Now, there was no sound in the palace, and His Majesty did not call anyone in, so at least, Su Wan was still alive. After an unknown amount of time, just after everyone else in the Shangfu Bureau was busy, Yan Yunhua was still waiting anxiously in the palace garden. At this time, a low and indifferent male voice finally came from the main hall, Wang Yi. Wang Yi, who had been conscientiously guarding the entrance of the main hall, heard the emperor's call and immediately pushed open the door and walked in quickly. As Wang Yi's figure disappeared, Yan Yunhua in the palace garden looked at the closed door again, and her heart was even more worried. Your Majesty. At this time, Wang Yi had walked quickly to the center of the main hall, bowing and waiting for his master's instructions. Wang Yi, Palace maid Su Wan has violated the rules of the palace and will be banished to Zinzheku to work for a month from now on. You will handle this matter personally. Wang Yi, who had his head lowered, quickly heard Su Rui's instructions. He immediately nodded and subconsciously searched for the little palace maid's figure in the corner of his eyes. No. Wang Yi froze. He remembered that the little palace maid called Su Wan was kneeling in that position before he left. How did she disappear? Steward Wang, are you looking for this servant? A crisp female voice suddenly sounded in front of Wang Yi. He subconsciously raised his head and was immediately stunned on the spot. His mouth was slightly open, and he couldn't close it at all. On the embroidered couch in front of him, the emperor reclined with a satisfied expression. The young palace maid was like a cat, comfortably nestled in the emperor's arms. At this moment, she was lazily raising her clear eyes and looking at Wang Yi with a smile. Steward Wang, I must have raised my head the wrong way. Wang Yi was shocked and immediately lowered his head quickly. Seeing that Wang Yi had the awareness he should have so quickly, Su Rui also smiled with satisfaction. Wang Yi, I trust you the most. I will leave this matter to you. Go do it immediately. As he spoke, Su Rui couldn't help but look down at Su Wan in his arms with a face full of reluctance. Seeing Su Rui open his mouth to say something, Su Wan raised her finger and gently rubbed it on his lips. Then she turned over and sat next to Su Rui. She leaned against his ear with a mysterious face and whispered, Your Majesty, I will wait for you in the Zinzheku tonight. Hearing Su Wan's words, His Majesty the Emperor's face was slightly happy. It was still his wife who knew his intentions. General Su, are you sure? Su Wan, hee. Steward Wang, let's go. At this time, Su Wan had already gotten down from the embroidered couch and walked to Wang Yi. This Miss Su, please. Wang Yi lowered his tone and spoke to Su Wan in a very respectful tone. At this time, if he still didn't understand what His Majesty came to the Shangfu Bureau for in the morning, then he really had lived these 30 years in vain. Steward Wang is too polite. This servant is now a sinner, how can I dare to walk in front of you? Su Wan heard Wang Yi's words, but she smiled slightly and raised her hand to make a gesture at Wang Yi. Steward Wang, please go first. Oh. When Wang Yi heard Su Wan's words, his eyes turned and he immediately turned to walk in front, while Su Wan lowered her head and followed behind him. When she was about to go out, she felt the familiar and gentle gaze that had been watching her from behind. Su Wan couldn't help but turn her head and smile at Su Rui. The palace door opened again. Seeing the figure of Wang Yi and Su Wan, Yan Yunhua, who had been waiting anxiously, immediately rushed over. Xiao Wan, are you okay? Impudent. Seeing Yan Yunhua rushing up to grab Su Wan's hand, Wang Yi's face immediately turned cold. He swept his horsetail whisk and swept Yan Yunhua aside. Is Miss Su's hand something you can touch? That belongs to His Majesty Steward Wang. Chen Ji, who had been waiting in the courtyard, immediately trotted up at this time. He first rolled his eyes at Yan Yunhua, then Chen Ji smiled at Wang Yi and lowered his body. Steward Wang, this little girl is scared silly. Don't lower yourself to her level. This Su Wan, His Majesty means. Banish Zinzhaku for a month. Hearing Chen Ji's words, Wang Yi whispered coldly. Zinzhaku. Chen Ji's face changed slightly, and Yan Yunhua's face had long turned ashen. What kind of place was Zinzhaku? That was a place in the harem that was even lower than the cold palace. It was not a place for people to stay at all. Steward Wang. Yan Yunhua suddenly knelt on the ground and grabbed Wang Yi's boots with both hands. Steward Wang, this servant wants to see His Majesty. This servant is willing to take Su Wan's place to be punished. 1 month, no, 2 months is fine. I beg Steward Wang to fulfill my wish. Wang Yi, do you think Miss Su went there to be punished? She went there to be a great aunt, okay? Steward Wang. Chen Ji on the side also couldn't bear it at this time. This Su Wan, she is also conscientious in the Shangfu Bureau. Steward Wang, do you think you can beg His Majesty? You don't have to plead for her anymore, otherwise, be careful that you won't be able to keep your head. Wang Yi was also at his wit's end. He immediately glared at them with a fierce look on his face. Someone, pull this little palace maid away from me. As he spoke, 2 inner servants quickly stepped forward and pulled Yan Yunhua, who had been pulling Wang Yi's boots, to the side. Let's go. Wang Yi straightened his body and strode forward. Su Wan followed behind him and looked at Yan Yunhua, who was pulled to the side. She couldn't help but smile comfortingly at her with a pale face. Sister Yunhua, don't worry, I can stand it. As she spoke, she quickly turned her head and quickly followed behind Wang Yi. After several people walked away, Yan Yunhua was slowly released. Xiao Wan. Yan Yunhua's face was already full of tears. Seeing Chen Ji still in the courtyard, Yan Yunhua immediately grabbed Chen Ji's sleeves as if she had found a life-saving straw. Chen Gonggong, save me. Save me. Seeing that Yan Yunhua was crying pitifully, Chen Ji rolled his eyes. Okay, Zhejia's clothes are going to be dirted by you. Poor Chen Xiaoji, who loved beauty, had to change into new clothes early in the morning. Zhejia will go to the Zinzhaku to buy some money. And, you have to pay for this money yourself. Speaking of this, Chen Ji couldn't help but hug his little sunny egg tightly. He was a soft-hearted person. He couldn't bear to see these girls crying and wiping their tears in front of him. However, a person must have principles. For example, Chen Xiaoji's principle was, you can mess up my hair, I will tolerate you, but you must not touch my wallet, I will fight you to the death. Chen Gonggong's stinginess was also well known in the Shangfu Bureau. In fact, with his official position, his monthly salary was very high, and he had the filial piety of the servants and palace maids every now and then. It was reasonable to say that he was also a small nouveau riche, but he was the biggest miser in the Shangfu Bureau. No matter what he encountered, he would not spare a single cent even if he was beaten to death. At this time, hearing that Qin Ji was willing to go to the Zinzheku to buy some money, Yan Yunhua immediately wiped her tears and handed her purse to Qin Ji. Although he was stingy, he was not greedy, so Yan Yunhua was not afraid of Qin Ji. Shaking the purse that Yan Yunhua handed to him, Qin Ji frowned. Is this all you have saved? Is it not enough? Yan Yunhua's face also changed, and then she suddenly thought of something. Chen Gonggong, I can go raise money. At this time, Yan Yunhua naturally thought of Yan Yuqing, who was working in Lu Gairen's palace. Chen Gonggong, you must wait for me, I will go raise money now. Chapter 164. Imperial Harem, Literary Splendor Residence. Lu Guiren, who was once favored by His Majesty, lived here. Why did it have to be said that it was once? Because ever since Yu Guiren, who could sing and dance, entered the palace, His Majesty rarely summoned Lu Guiren to serve him. The atmosphere in Literary Splendor Residence has been very depressing these past few days, and today was a bit strange. Yuqing, did you really find out? At this time, Lu Guiren was letting the palace maid beside her dress up. A bright palace dress set off her fair and delicate face, making her look very charming and charming. At this time, hearing Lu Guiren's question, Yan Yuqing, who had been standing respectfully to the side, immediately replied in a low voice. Replying to Master, this slave inquired clearly that Yu Guiren offended the emperor's face and was executed. Today, because His Majesty was in a bad mood, he started a massacre in the imperial harem. Both Jingyun Palace and the Shangfu Bureau were affected. When she said this, Yan Yuqing's voice trembled. Lu Guiren raised her beautiful eyes and looked at Yan Yuqing's small face slightly. Yuqing, I remember that your sister works in the Shangfu Bureau, right? Is she okay? Thank you for your concern. When this slave just went out to inquire, His Majesty's people were still surrounding the Shangfu Bureau. I don't know what the situation inside is like. At this point, Yan Yuqing's face couldn't help but show a bit of worry. She and Yan Yunhua were not sisters, but thanks to her care in the past year, Yan Yuqing was not without feelings for her. Of course, Yan Yuqing, as a concubine daughter of the Yan family, had been treated coldly by others since she was a child. She had long seen through the fickleness of the world. Don't look at how she was a month younger than Yan Yunhua, she was already very scheming. Now, she behaved like this in front of Lu Guiren. First, she wanted Lu Guiren to see how much she valued friendship and loyalty. Second, she planned to take the opportunity to ask for permission to visit the Shangfu Bureau again. What if she was lucky enough to meet His Majesty there? Lu Guiren didn't know Yan Yuqing's thoughts at this time. She was indeed deceived by Yan Yuqing's immature face. Lu Guiren was naturally very happy to learn that Yu Guiren was dead, but His Majesty was a bit abnormal today. In Lu Guiren's impression, His Majesty had always been very calm and his character was not tyrannical. What crime did Yu Guiren commit to make His Majesty so angry? The Tranquil Cloud Palace was the resting palace of honored consort Shu. She was already an imperial consort, so the power behind her naturally could not be underestimated. Today, His Majesty had actually massacred the Tranquil Cloud Palace. Then, what was the connection? Needless to say, the women in the harem must have a certain level of reasoning ability. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. Lu Guiren pondered for a long time but still couldn't find the connection between Yu Guiren and Xu Fei. At this time, an inner attendant of flourishing literature residents hurried into the room and whispered a few words in Lu Guiren's ear. Lu Guiren couldn't help raising his eyes to look at Yan Yuqing. Yuqing, your sister has come to see you. Go and see what she wants. Yan Yunuo came. Hearing Lu Guiren's words, Yan Yuqing immediately left in a hurry and then quickly walked out of the dormitory. Outside Wenhua House, Yan Yunuo was anxiously pacing back and forth at the gate. Sister. Yan Yuqing's face flashed when she saw Yan Yunuo's expression. She was very familiar with Yan Yunuo's expression. It seemed that something had really happened to the Shangfu Bureau. Yuqing. Seeing Yan Yuqing's face, Yan Yunuo immediately grabbed her sister's hand and said anxiously, Yuqing, you must save Xiao Wan, save her. Something happened to Su Wan. Could it be? Yan Yuqing's expression was firm and she patted Yan Yunuo's hand hard. Sister, speak slowly. Did something happen in the Shangfu Bureau? While Yan Yunuo and Yan Yuqing were discussing how to rescue Su Wan had already followed Wang Yi to the Zinzheku, which was located in the innermost secluded corner of the Imperial City and was the dirtiest and worst place in the entire Imperial City. When the supervisor nanny of the Zinzheku saw that Steward Wang had personally brought people over, she immediately ran out of the door with small steps and came to Wang Yi. Steward Wang, why did you come in person? Bai Mama, your bitter days are about to come to an end. Seeing Bai Mama's charming smile at herself, Wang Yi whispered with a slightly deeper meaning. This is. Bai Mama's eyes lit up and she subconsciously approached Wang Yi. She raised her hand and stuffed a banknote into Wang Yi's hand. Please guide me, Steward Wang. One of the rules of survival for the harem, no matter when and where, you must carry a purse, banknote, and a lot of light valuables with you. These things may be used at any time and sometimes can even save lives. Hey, Bai Mama is too polite. Wang Yi unexpectedly blocked the banknote and turned to look at Su Wan respectfully. Miss Su, this is the supervisor of the Zinzheku, Bai Mama. Hello, Bai Mama. Su Wan nodded at Bai Mama. Although Bai Mama had stayed in the Zinzheku for many years and hadn't developed much, her eyes were very sharp. Seeing that Wang Yi was so polite to Miss Su in front of her, Bai Mama naturally didn't dare to be arrogant. When she heard Su Wan's question, she immediately nodded and smiled. Hello, Miss Su. Hello, Miss Su. Steward Wang, Miss Su is. After Bai Mama greeted Su Wan, she looked at Wang Yi with a puzzled face. Wang Yi gently leaned over to Bai Mama's ear and whispered a few words. Bai Mama's face changed again and again, and finally, her whole face was a little distorted with excitement. Steward Wang, don't worry. Leave Miss Su to this servant. This servant will never let her lose a single hair. Hearing Bai Mama's answer, Wang Yi nodded with satisfaction. Okay, I have to go back and report to His Majesty. Having said this, Wang Yi couldn't help but look at Su Wan again and whispered in a low voice. Miss Su, do you have any words for this servant to pass on to His Majesty? Hearing Wang Yi's question, Su Wan smiled lightly and whispered in Wang Yi's ear. Wang Yi was stunned when he heard Su Wan's words, but he still nodded vigorously. Miss Su, please rest assured, this servant will definitely pass on your words to His Majesty. This servant will take his leave now. With that, Wang Yi turned and strode away. Seeing that Wang Yi had gone far away, Bai Mama had a gentle face and looked at Su Wan with a smile. Miss Su, this Zinzheku is very simple and crude. If you don't mind, you can temporarily stay in this old servant's room. Don't worry, this old servant will keep the room very clean and all the supplies will be replaced with new ones. No need to go through so much trouble. Su Wan also smiled at Bai Mama. Just prepare the worst and crudest room for me. Remember, the worse the better. Bai Mama. Miss Su, are you trying to torture yourself? Although she cursed in her heart, when she thought of what Steward Wang had promised her, as long as she served this master well, he would be able to transfer her out of the Zintaku. With such a good opportunity in front of her, how could she give it up? Mama clapped her hands. Miss, don't worry. There is nothing else in this Zintaku, but dirty and messy places are everywhere. Please go. Hearing Mama's words, Suwon nodded with a smile. I am naturally reassured by Mama's work. In the future, Suwon will have to thank Mama for taking care of me here. Also, I hope Mama won't tell anyone about anything that happened here. Words must not be passed to 6 years, the second rule of the harem. This old servant understands, Miss Su can rest assured. With that said, Mama immediately straightened up and shouted, Little girl, let me tell you, once you enter my Zintaku, you have to listen to me, Mama's words. Do you think this is still your Shangfu bureau? You really don't know what's good for you. I guess you can only stay here for the rest of your life. Hurry up and follow me. While speaking, Mama had already arrogantly led Suwon into the gate of the Zintaku. In this harem, there was really no shortage of anything but men, especially characters with superb acting skills. Any random palace maid could probably be qualified as a movie queen in modern times. In the Zintaku, a group of palace maids who were about to go out saw Mama's figure and all bowed respectfully. When they saw the young Suwon behind her, they all showed a look of pity. What kind of place was this Zintaku? In the entire imperial city, even in the imperial palace and the imperial mausoleum, the most arduous and tiring tasks, such as cleaning toilets and pouring out night incense, were the responsibility of the Zintaku. They had always been the group of people who worked the hardest, had the smallest monthly salary, and had the lowest status. There were many palace maids who were sentenced to the Zintaku at first and thought that they could get out after their sentence was completed. However, in less than a month after entering this place, their bodies were already in poor health. The masters never lacked people to order around. Over time, they had long forgotten about you. Once you came in, you couldn't get out. Under everyone's sympathetic and pitiful eyes, Suwon first followed Mama into the room. This was the rule that every newcomer had to go through. It was said to be lectured by Mama, but in fact, it was to show filial piety to Mama. If you have a lot of silver, then you can do some less tiring work. If you don't have silver, not only will you be sent to do the most bitter and tiring work, but you will also be beaten up by Mama. Ah! Spare me, Mama! Not long after, sure enough, Suwon's miserable scream came from the room. The people in the courtyard silently looked at each other, no one spoke, and some people's eyes carried a smile of schadenfreude. Finally, a newcomer came. This task of cleaning the toilet, I won't continue to do it, right? Chapter 165. It was night and the moonlight was bright. Suwon sat in the narrow and simple room that Mama had specially prepared for herself. She was bored and counted the stars in the sky through the broken window. Just as she counted to 101, the broken wooden door was suddenly blown open by a gust of wind and a slender figure appeared in front of Suwon like a ghost. Seeing Su Rui suddenly appear in front of her wearing casual clothes, Suwon stood up and smiled at him. You're here? Su Rui stared at Suwon and also looked at everything in the room. How do people live in this place? His brows furrowed tightly and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. This is just a facade for Yen Yunhua to see. Who said I want to live here? Suwon raised her eyebrows at Su Rui. Don't you want me to sleep with you? Or which concubine are you going to recruit to the Chinkuan palace to serve you? There's no such thing. Of course, I want to sleep with my wife. And it's getting late, haven't you eaten yet? Suwon interrupted Su Rui's words. When Wang Yi left in the morning, Suwon specifically told him to tell His Majesty not to eat dinner before coming over at night. And Su Rui naturally did as Suwon said. Hearing Su Wan's words, he subconsciously touched his stomach. I haven't eaten yet. Xiao Wan, what do you want to eat with me? There's still time. Now, you have to help me do something. Su Wan picked up a set of old servant clothes from her narrow wooden bed. You change your clothes first and then help me do some work. If you do well, I will personally cook delicious food for you tonight. There's actually this kind of treatment? Hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui immediately changed his clothes with a smile and then looked at his wife with a gentle face. Xiao Wan, what do you want me to help you do? Sweep the courtyard or chop firewood? Well, it's nothing, just clean the toilets in the nearby palace. Su Wan blinked a pair of clear black eyes and looked at Su Rui with a serious face. Her tone was still so indifferent and calm. Sweep the toilets. Wife, are you joking? Look into my eyes, I'm serious. Su Wan stared at Su Rui with a serious expression. Now that the entire Zintaku knows that I offended by Mama, I naturally have to do the dirtiest and most tiring work. Although it sounded reasonable, Su Rui felt that his wife was looking at him a bit strangely. Could it be a trap? Isn't it just cleaning the toilet? At least it's better than pouring night incense, right? There was nothing in this world that could baffle our General Su. For the sake of his wife, for the sake of the delicacies his wife had personally made, General Su was willing to give it his all. Seeing that Su Rui really took the tools in the courtyard and went out, Su Wan didn't follow. She knew that Su Rui was a person who always did things as he said. He wouldn't lie and disdained to lie. Not long after, Su Rui came back with a cold expression. As soon as he entered the room, there was an unpleasant smell. Seeing his disdainful expression, Su Wan covered her mouth and smiled. Don't look so serious. I'll help you change your clothes. Let's go back to Qinquan Palace, okay? Su Rui answered sullenly. He had to take a good bath after going back. The moon was in the middle of the sky and the Qinquan Palace was hazy. After Su Rui brought Su Wan back, he dismissed the people around him. Other than Wang Yi, no one else knew that there was another person in the palace. Soaking in the warm water and smelling the fragrance of the bath soup, Su Rui finally sighed comfortably. Are you done bathing? At this time, Su Wan's voice suddenly rang. Su Rui looked up to see Su Wan wearing a white undergarment. Her hair was scattered and she was holding a bowl of soup, smiling as she walked over. Right now, the owner of Su Wan's body wasn't even 15 years old. Although she had reached the marriageable age in the Great Shang dynasty, her face was still a bit immature and her figure hadn't fully developed. Under the snow-white undergarment, the slightly exquisite figure that belonged to a young girl made General Su turn his face away. Nanny, he couldn't continue looking. It was easy to commit a crime if he looked for too long. Are you hungry? At this time, Su Wan was already sitting by the bathtub, her snow-white feet making a string of splashes on the water surface. Come here, I'll feed you the soup. I made it myself. Oh. Su Rui swam to Su Wan's side naked. Seeing him look up at her with sparkling eyes, Su Wan couldn't help but be in a good mood. She scooped a spoonful of soup and gently handed it to Su Rui. Seeing that Su Rui had finished the soup, Su Wan smiled at him. Does it taste good? It does. Su Rui nodded. His wife made the best soup in the world. It's good. Drink it all. Saying this, Su Wan scooped another spoonful of soup for Su Rui. She looked at the misty bathtub through the swaying bead curtain. The scene of the two getting along was exceptionally warm. Just that, a quarter of an hour later. Wife. Su Rui's voice was a bit hoarse and his gaze towards Su Wan became a bit gloomy. What did you use to make the soup? Oh, you can't tell. Su Wan slightly lowered her eyes and looked at Su Rui in the water. I just used some common tonics. And, ginseng, deer penis, and so on. Didn't you like it a lot in Jin Qin Wang Fu? The word like was heavily emphasized by Su Wan. Hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui's expression immediately changed. What happened to the gentle, virtuous, and considerate wife? Su Wan, you did it on purpose. You definitely did it on purpose. Wife, Su Rui climbed out of the bathtub and didn't bother to put on a robe. He directly hugged Su Wan's slightly cold body. I feel uncomfortable. I know you feel uncomfortable. Su Wan turned over and broke free from Su Rui's embrace. Then she looked at Wang Yi, who had been treating her as a background board not too far away. Steward Wang, bring the Imperial Concubine's card over. Wang Yi, what was with this inexplicable feeling of being shot while lying down? Wang Yi, get out. Without waiting for Wang Yi to move, Su Rui had already pulled up the robe on the ground. While pulling Su Wan to the dragon bed, he coldly shouted in a low voice. Understood. Wang Yi wiped the sweat on his forehead and quickly retreated. In front of the dragon bed, Su Rui threw Su Wan on the bed. Speak, what other moves do you have? Nothing. Su Wan innocently spread out her hands. Facing her husband, she couldn't bear to be ruthless. Tormenting him like this today was just because. That little bit of jealousy in her heart. She wouldn't allow anyone to touch her man. No more moves. Hearing Su Wan's answer and seeing her innocent expression lying on the bed, Su Rui couldn't help but take a deep breath. Since you're not going to torment me, then sleep. As he spoke, he lifted a corner of the brocade quilt and skillfully wrapped Su Wan's entire body with the quilt, pushing her to the innermost side of the bed. I'll cultivate for a bit. You sleep first. Seeing Su Rui sitting cross-legged on the bed planning to adjust his breathing, Su Wan rolled in the quilt like a small silkworm and rolled to Su Rui's side. Su Rui, you'll sleep with me? Hearing his wife's pitiful invitation, Su Rui's breath sank and he once again rolled Su Wan to the innermost side of the bed. Su Wan. Go to sleep. Oh, then you should sleep early too. Don't tire yourself out. Seeing that Su Rui was so determined, Su Wan could only obediently shrink into a corner and close her eyes. Last night, her body had suffered for an entire night. Today, she could finally sleep well. Not long after, Su Wan entered dreamland. Seeing that Su Wan had fallen asleep, Su Rui then closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Not long after, his body was covered in sweat. Su Wan, how much did you add to the soup? General Su began to regret rejecting Su Wan too straightforwardly. But when he opened his eyes again and saw the exceptionally peaceful face sleeping on the bed, Su Rui's gaze involuntarily softened. Forget it, isn't it just adjusting her breathing for a night? It's not a big deal, as long as she doesn't talk about flipping the sign again and again in the future. Thinking like this, Su Rui once again closed his eyes and cultivated. In the middle of the night, the candlelight in the bedroom flickered. When Su Rui was concentrating on cultivating, Su Wan, who was in the bed, woke up at some point. A pair of clear eyes stared at Su Rui's back without blinking. Looking and looking, Su Wan couldn't help but curve her lips and once again closed her eyes to sleep peacefully. In this world, it's so good to have you. Before meeting Su Rui, she always felt that it didn't matter how she was by herself. But after meeting Su Rui, Su Wan increasingly felt that she couldn't leave him. She didn't dare to imagine what the world would be like without Su Rui. Just like Su Wan was General Su's reverse scale, Su Rui was also the forbidden area that Su Wan couldn't touch. Chapter 166. When Su Wan opened her eyes the next day, she found that she had returned to the small room in the Zinsaku, and she was still wrapped in a thick and warm tribute blanket. Miss Sue, are you up? By Mama's voice just sounded outside the room. Because Sue Wan's room was in the innermost part of the Zinzheku courtyard and its location was also remote, By Mama was not afraid of others seeing her here. Mama, please come in. Sue Wan folded the blanket and placed it under the coarse quilt, and then slowly began to put on her clothes. The servants of the Zinzheku wore the lowest grade of cloth clothes, which were very prickly on the body. Fortunately, By Mama had already done something to the clothes. Although Sue Wan's clothes looked the same as others from the outside, the inside of the clothes was sewn with soft satin. This kind of thing to deceive people was very common in the palace, so there was no need to spend time to prepare. Sue Wan hadn't put on the outer palace dress when By Mama came in with toiletries. Good morning, Miss Sue. Did you sleep well last night? Facing Sue Wan, By Mama's posture was very low. Thank you for your concern, Mama. I slept very well. Sue Wan replied softly, and By Mama's gaze swept over Sue Wan's bed. When she saw the corner of the blanket exposed under the quilt, her eyes changed and the smile on her face became more eager. Miss, the Zinzheku is really simple and crude. Let this old slave serve you to freshen up. All right. Seeing By Mama's enthusiasm, Sue Wan naturally nodded her head. In the harem, if someone fawns over you, it proves that you are doing well and have value. At this time, in the face of others' goodwill, you must not refuse, because no matter what reason you have to refuse others, it is likely to be misunderstood as looking down on them. This is a taboo for people in the harem. No one knows who will be down and out in the next second, and no one knows who will be successful in the next moment. In the depths of the palace, you can only make friends and never make enemies. Sue Wan has actually done a lot of tasks in the imperial palace. She has long been clear about the ways of the harem. She also knows that By Mama's treatment of herself was naturally ordered by Wang Yi. If she doesn't give her this opportunity, I'm afraid she will always be anxious, right? Under the service of By Mama, Sue Wan simply washed up. After finishing some, By Mama packed up the things and looked at Sue Wan with a smile again. Miss Sue, what do you want to eat for breakfast? This old servant has a small kitchen. If you don't mind, this old servant can cook for you. I'm not picky about food. Nanny, if someone comes to ask about me today, you know what to say, right? Sue Wan sat on the wooden bed and raised her eyelids to look at By Mama. By Mama was a little scared by her gaze. You say, this little girl has delicate features, but why is her eyes so penetrating when she looks at people? This old servant knows what to say. Miss, you can rest assured. By Mama patted her chest and repeatedly assured Sue Wan. And, that's good. Also, Sue Wan narrowed her eyes and whispered again, if someone comes to plead for me, don't agree without this amount. Looking at Sue Wan waving her palm, By Mama couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. 500 taels. She had worked in the Zinzheku for all these years, but she had never received so much money at one time. 500 taels of silver was also a large amount of expenditure for an ordinary palace maid, and Sue Wan knew very well that Yan Yunua's monthly salary was sent back to her hometown to her family. There were many children in her family, and life was very difficult. Otherwise, she would not have been sold to Yan Fu as a maid. 500 taels of silver was definitely an astronomical figure for Yan Yunua, and Holy Mother Yan had to take out the money in order to save Sue Wan. So, now the question was, what should she do to borrow 500 taels of silver? Come on, Holy Mother Yan, I'm optimistic about you. As Sue Wan expected, before the morning was over, Chen Ji came to the Zinzheku with a smile on his face. Isn't this Chen Gonggong? What wind blew you here? Although they were both stewards, the Shangfu Bureau belonged to one of the 24 departments of the 6th Bureau and was a department with real power. Compared with the Zinzheku, which was despised by tens of thousands of people, it was absolutely like heaven and earth. Therefore, when Bai Mama saw Chen-ji, she immediately greeted him with a smile. Bai Mama, I'm here to give you some hometown specialties. Chen-ji's phoenix eyes raised, but he appeared very amorous. Bai Mama looked at Chen-ji's smiling face, and her expression was a little strange. It must be said that this Chen Gonggong was also a weirdo. He had a girly appearance since he was a child. It was said that when he was a child, his family was poor and owed a lot of money to others. The creditor took a fancy to him and wanted to snatch him back to be his wife. Later, when he learned that he was a man, the man still didn't give up and actually wanted to take him back home to be a male attendant. At that time, Chen-ji was young but had a strong mind. On the night of the bridal chamber, he injured the man and then escaped in a hurry. At that time, the imperial city was selecting an inner attendant. In order to be afraid that the man would report him to the authorities and put him in prison, Chen-ji simply signed up and entered the palace to be an inner attendant. When he first entered the palace, Chen-ji was often bullied because of his fair and delicate appearance, but he never said a word. He always stabbed people from behind with a knife. Stabbing and stabbing, he entered the eyes of Steward Wang. Later, he was promoted all the way to the position of the steward of the Shangfu Bureau. This kind of resume can only be observed and not copied. By Mama, look at this Hitian jujube, it's very sweet this year. Chen-ji didn't pay attention to Bai Mama's strange expression and stuffed a small basket of jujubes into her hands. Bai Mama smiled and raised her hand to pick up the inconspicuous pouch in the basket without a trace. Her face was slightly embarrassed. Chen Gonggong, I'm old and my teeth aren't good. I can't eat dry, hard, and sweet things recently. Thank you for your kindness, but this thing, you should take it back. Hearing Bai Mama's words, Chen-ji's expression froze. He hadn't said what he wanted her to do and she refused so bluntly. What does this mean? Bai Mama, you're not giving Zeiji a face. As he said this, Chen-ji's face gradually became cold. Chen Gonggong, don't worry, let's talk further. Bai Mama carefully pulled Chen-ji to the corner outside the door. You should be here for that girl Su-won this time, right? Exactly. Chen-ji nodded and couldn't help but look at Bai Mama. Did someone else come? This. You don't have to worry about it. She was personally brought by Steward Wang. Steward Wang repeatedly told me to discipline her well. I really don't dare to make the decision without authorization. Unless. Speaking of this, the smile on Bai Mama's face was somewhat meaningful. Seeing her smile, Chen-ji immediately understood. Don't beat around the bush with Zeiji, say a number. Helping others do things, Chen-ji didn't feel distressed about the money. At this time, he put on a look of indifference. About this, hee. Bai Mama smiled and raised her hand to fan her face. Seeing her action, Chen-ji couldn't help but whisper, Bai Mama, you're asking for an exorbitant price, aren't you afraid of being too full? Hee. Bai Mama just smiled brightly. Do you think she's willing? Isn't this what Great Aunt ordered? Seeing that Bai Mama just smiled and didn't speak, Chen-ji frowned again. Just this number, can't it be less? Not a single cent less. Bai Mama's face also became serious. The risk this time is too great. Even if I get this silver, this old servant can only try her best to deal with it. Seeing that Bai Mama was sincere, Chen-ji had to nod. Okay, I understand. I'll go back and study it. Saying this, he tightened the basket in his hand and Chen-ji left with small steps. Chapter 167. In the Imperial Study Room. Many of these memorials came from the Southern faction in the court. The Southern faction was the die-hard faction headed by the Southern Imperial Censor. They had always been the group of people who gave Dongfang Yao the most headaches. After the original owner ascended the throne, these old guys gave him a lot of trouble. But in the face of these two veterans, they also had the support of the Empress Dowager, so Dongfang Yao could only endure. However, she didn't expect these old fellows to stretch their hands so far. They even meddled in the emperor's harem. Su Rui smiled coldly at the remonstrations on the table that reprimanded him for being too tyrannical. What was tyrannical? You people don't know what true tyrannical is. You're just a group of self-righteous, stubborn old men who flaunt their seniority. Dongfang Yao cared about old sentiments and wanted to stabilize the court. He had to compromise with the people of the southern faction, but now that Su Rui had become Dongfang Yao, he didn't care about the advice of these people. If he really couldn't do it, he would just kill them all. So what? Your Majesty. Wang Yi, who was originally guarding outside the study, quickly came to Su Rui's side, bowed, lowered his head and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, someone from the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful has come. The Empress Dowager summons you to the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful to eat together. Empress Dowager. I am very busy and have no time. Regarding the current Empress Dowager, Su Rui didn't have the slightest favorable impression. The Empress Dowager, who was widowed at a young age, has been in close contact with her relatives and has always wanted to influence the politics of the court. More importantly, she is not Dongfang Yao's biological mother. Naturally, the mother and son are not of the same mind. Wang Yi wasn't surprised. Her Majesty had been too abnormal these days. Wang Yi, who had accepted too many surprises, had learned to be very calm. Didn't he just reject the Empress Dowager? Wasn't this what His Majesty had always wanted to do but never had the chance to do? Thinking of that person in the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful, Wang Yi couldn't help but frown. When the former emperor was still alive, she was so gentle, virtuous, and considerate. However, after the former emperor passed away and entrusted the current emperor to her, she immediately seemed to have changed into a different person. All day long, she was full of ambition, forming cliques for personal gain. What was wrong with being the empress? After Wang Yi left, Su Rui casually flipped through a few memorials. When he saw certain memorials from the Imperial Army's general, Su Rui's movements froze and his gaze fell on a person's name. Chen Xingbei. He was Su Wan's fiancé in the original plot and also the male lead Darren of this world. And this memorial was written by the general of the Imperial Army, intending to promote some of his outstanding guards. Chen Xingbei was also included in this promotion. Su Rui furrowed his brows and looked at it for a long time. In the end, he still wrote the two words, approved, on it. As for the other memorials, they were all ignored by General Su. Harem, Shangfu Bureau. After such a big incident yesterday, several people died in the Shangfu Bureau. Now, there was a serious shortage of manpower. Liao Si was taking Yan Yunhua to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to look at the roster of some new palace maids. She planned to screen some little palace maids with good needlework to supplement the manpower of the Shangfu Bureau. Su Bingyue. In the palace maid roster, Yan Yunhua unexpectedly saw Su Bingyue's name. When she was at the Imperial Hospital that day, she got to know the little palace maid and knew that she and Su Wan sent her to the Imperial Hospital together. Later, she also told her that her full name was Su Bingyue. Yunhua, do you know her? Hearing Yan Yunhua's voice, Liao Si turned to look at her and asked doubtfully. Replying to Liao Si, yesterday, this servant contracted a cold. It was she and Su Wan who sent this servant to the Imperial Hospital together. Speaking of this, Yan Yunhua couldn't help but think of Su Wan who was sent to the Zinteku. Her expression immediately became worried. I wonder how Su Wan is doing over there. Her health is not good, I wonder if she can endure it. Because the Shangfu Bureau was too busy today, Yan Yunhua didn't have time to meet with Qin Ji, and she didn't know how things were going on his side. Hearing Yan Yunhua's worried words, Liao Si just sighed in her heart. Su Wan was also a good seedling, but she offended His Majesty. Although it was only said that she was sent to the Zinzheku for a month, when the time came, without His Majesty's verbal order, who would dare to let her out privately? Yunhua, in this deep palace, everyone is rootless duckweed. Everyone has their own destiny. You just need to take care of yourself. Liao Si could see that Yan Yunhua was too kind-hearted and soft-hearted. She would give her a few words from time to time, lest she lose her life because she didn't trust others in the future. Hearing Liao Si's words, Yan Yunhua moved her lips but did not speak. She knew that Liao Si had her own way of doing things, but Yan Yunhua also had her own principles. She knew that Su Wan suffered such a punishment because of her, so she had to find a way to rescue her no matter what. Since you know this Su Bingyue, what do you think of her? Seeing that Yan Yunhua did not speak, Liao Si's gaze fell on the palace maid roster in her hand. Bingyue is very kind and enthusiastic. She is a good girl. Yan Yunhua thought of Su Bingyue's face in her memory and couldn't help but say a few good words for her. Since you think she is good, let her replace Su Wan and go to work with you. Liao Si still trusted Yan Yunhua very much. Seeing Liao Si put a check mark on Su Bingyue's name, Yan Yunhua's face also showed a happy smile. At this time, Holy Mother Yan would never think that in the near future, Su Bingyue would become her biggest enemy in this life. Zinzheku, Su Wan, who stayed in the room all morning with nothing to do, simply strolled around the courtyard of the Zinzheku. This place was different from the laundry bureau. The palace servants of the laundry bureau had to wash clothes in the courtyard every day and could only stay in the same place from morning to night. Most of the people in the Zinzheku worked outside and only came back at night or when it was time to eat. At noon, the courtyard of the Zinzheku was empty. The withered yellow leaves were also blown to the ground by the autumn wind. The fallen leaves all over the ground made the already lonely courtyard even more desolate. Su Wan strolled around the courtyard. When she walked to the gate, she saw a sneaky figure looking around outside the door of the Zinzheku. Su Wan frowned and did not intend to pay attention to it, but at this time, the little palace maid in blue at the door saw Su Wan's figure. She quickly waved at her and whispered, "Hey! This younger sister, please speak further." Su Wan, can I pretend that I didn't hear it? Younger sister. This younger sister. Seeing that Su Wan completely ignored her and turned to go back, the little palace maid was also anxious. She looked around, quickly rushed into the gate of the Zinzheku, and then forcefully pulled Su Wan to the corner outside the door. "This younger sister, elder sister has something to ask you." While speaking, the palace maid had already stuffed some broken silver into Su Wan's hand. The monthly salary of the palace maids in the Zinzheku was only half of that of the low-ranking palace maids. Although these broken silver pieces were small, it was also an unexpected fortune in their eyes. The palace maid dressed in blue brocade was waiting for Su Wan to reveal a flattering smile to her. In the end, Su Wan just silently put away the silver and indifferently looked at her. "You ask, I don't know much." In fact, she knew nothing about the people in the Zinzheku, okay? Ah. The little palace maid quickly reacted after listening to Su Wan's words and asked quickly, "Do you know that a new palace maid named Su Wan came to your Zinzheku yesterday?" Su Wan's eyes flashed when she heard her name, and then she nodded lightly. "I know." "Then do you know why she entered the Zinzheku?" The palace maid in blue went on to ask, as if afraid of being seen by others. Her tone became faster and faster. "I heard that she offended His Majesty." Su Wan continued to answer unhurriedly, and her eyes took the opportunity to glance at the little palace maid. She was not old, but she was wearing a brocade palace dress, and the headdress in her hair was also expensive. If Su Wan did not guess wrong, she should be the palace maid in charge of a certain imperial concubine, and this imperial concubine was most likely. Do you know what she did to offend His Majesty? The inquiry of the palace maid in blue interrupted Su Wan's thoughts. I don't know. Su Wan shook her head innocently. She didn't say this, and it's not good for us to ask. Hearing Su Wan's answer, the palace maid in blue hesitated and took out some broken silver pieces and stuffed them into Su Wan's hand. Help me find out the reason why she was punished today. I will come here again at this time tomorrow. If you can find out, I will reward you generously. Reward? Su Wan's eyes flashed. Okay, I still don't know how to address you, sister. Me? The palace maid in blue hesitated for a moment, but still said in a low voice, You can call me Sister Wan Aksain. I will leave first. You must remember what I entrusted you with. Wait for me here tomorrow. As she spoke, Wan Aksain looked around with a guilty conscience. Then, she quickly left in a flash. Wan Aksain, the palace maid in charge of Shuning Palace, one of concubine Liang's confidants. Su Wan stared at the direction where Wan Aksain left, thinking of the concubine Liang that she had never met. She specifically sent someone to inquire about her news. Was it simply curious about the bloody incident in the harem? Or was it because she had a discerning eye for talent, and was staring at her at this time? Chapter 168. Shuning Palace. After Wan Aksain came back from the Zinzheku, she immediately entered Liang Fei's bedroom. At this time, Liang Fei was half lying on the chaise lounge looking at a drawing book. Hearing Wan Aksain's hurried footsteps, her eyes flashed, and her lily-white hand gently flipped the drawing book in her hand and put it aside. Master. Wan Aksain carefully leaned against the chaise lounge, bent over and whispered a few words in Liang Fei's ear. Liang Fei nodded, and her beautiful red phoenix eyes flashed. Wan Aksain, you did a good job, remember to be on time tomorrow. Yes. Wan Aksain nodded, and then whispered hesitantly, Master, about the Prime Minister's residence, Ben Gong will write a letter to Uncle, telling him not to act rashly. His Majesty's actions these 2 days have a deep meaning. I'm afraid that the stubborn old fogies of the southern faction will not be able to sit still, and Ben Gong also heard that the person in the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful is very angry today, hee. Sneering twice, Liang Fei slowly sat up straight with the help of Wan Aksain. Ben Gong really can't make up my mind about Yu Gairen's death, but the matter of Jingyun Palace and the Shangfu Bureau must be involved. You must help Ben Gong find out the truth. Knowing oneself and knowing the enemy was the only way to win 100 battles. Liang Fei was born into a noble family in the capital. Her father was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, and her uncle was the left prime minister of the current dynasty. She was familiar with military books and had excellent literary talent. When she was young, many children of officials came to marry her. Unfortunately, in the end, she still followed her uncle's request and entered the palace as a concubine. Because of her good family background, she became an imperial concubine when she first entered the palace and was in love with Dong Fangyao for a period of time, but over time, Dong Fangyao began to alienate her. In fact, Liang Fei understood in her heart that the emperor did not like her at all. He made her an imperial concubine just because of her family's face. Even the initial favor was just to make her stay in the harem. For a woman as intelligent as Liang Fei, Dong Fangyao would not give her the chance to be favored in the 6 palaces or even to have children. In this lifetime, as long as her maiden family did not fall, she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life, until she died of old age in this harem. If unfortunately, her family declined, what awaited her was the ruined courtyard of the cold palace. In fact, it was just this. If it was a normal woman, she would be content with the situation, but concubine Liang was not willing. She had a body full of talent, but there was no place for her to use it. She was not willing to be a cold concubine in this huge harem that no one cared about. Did His Majesty not like her? It didn't matter. She could cultivate her own power. She wanted to personally cultivate a beautiful concubine and stir up the harem. The night was hazy. Most of the people in the Zinseku had already lined up to take a bath after a day of tiring work, and then couldn't wait to go back to their rooms to rest. Su-won did not return to her room at this time. Instead, she was in a daze in the backyard. Not long after, a familiar figure floated over. Seeing Su-rue's gray inner attendant attire, Su-won widened her eyes with a smile. "Your Majesty, what are you playing at?" "Role-playing." "Ahem." Su-rue coughed twice and said seriously, "What else is there to do today?" "Wife, just tell me what to do." Su-won, that it felt like General Su really regarded himself as an outstanding model worker in the country. "What about tonight? Does serving me in the bath count?" Su-won tugged at her clothes in disgust. "I've stayed here for 2 days and I'm going to die of filth from head to toe. Since your Majesty loves labor so much, help me bathe and change my clothes. If you do well, there will be a reward." "Reward and what not?" Su-rue's face was full of black lines. "It won't be a big tonic soup again, right?" Seeing General Su's suspicious appearance, Su-won felt particularly good. "Of course, not." That's good, that's good." As soon as he heard that his wife finally stopped using big moves, General Su immediately happily carried his wife back to the big bathroom in the palace to take a bath. After taking a bath, Su-won pulled Wang Yi to the small kitchen to fiddle with things. When she came back again, she was holding a bowl of soup in her hand. "Su-rue, didn't you say that there was no big tonic soup?" Seeing that even Su-rue's face changed, Su-won smiled and brought the soup bowl to the table. "Then do you want a drink or not?" "Drink." Su-rue nodded hard. As a result, as soon as the soup entered his mouth, the mellow taste immediately made his knitted eyebrows stretch out. "Wife, this is, to get rid of your impurities." Su-won smiled and shrugged her shoulders, then she strolled to the desk in the warm room and looked at the memorials piled on the table. She casually flipped through them and saw that they were all remonstrations from the imperial censorate. Su-won couldn't help but curl her lips. Being an emperor is really tiring. Externally, he had to deal with the major events of the imperial court, balance the forces of the various parties in the court, and guard against the internal strife of the various vassal kings. Internally, the women in the harem fought endlessly all day long, and there was also an ambitious empress dowager eyeing him covetously from the side. Dongfang Yao being an emperor was really bitter hearing Su-won sigh. Su-rue on the side was non-committal. He had been a vassal king who changed the dynasty and usurped the throne, and he had also been a general who led troops to rebel. Being an emperor, this was really the first time. General Su really didn't like this position, but since ancient times, there were countless people who broke their heads and racked their brains to sit on this dragon throne. Speaking of which, Dong Fangli was estimated to enter the palace again in a few days. His Royal Highness Rui Wang had always been eyeing this throne covetously, waiting to catch Dong Fangyao's mistakes. Now that Dong Fangyao had started a massacre in the harem, he had already provoked the dissatisfaction of the southern faction and the Empress Dowager. If Dong Fangli didn't take the opportunity to do something, he would be unworthy of his villain boss setting. Thinking about Dong Fangli in his heart, Su-rue's eyes couldn't help but become complicated. Should that disaster be killed directly to save trouble, or should he keep him for other purposes? "Master." Wang Yi's voice suddenly came from afar. He walked in quickly from outside the hall, his body still carrying the chill of the night. "Master, the Empress Dowager has come." Su-rue raised his eyes coldly. This Empress Dowager was really impatient. She couldn't keep her cool so quickly. rushing to the palace in the middle of the night. "Master, look, Miss Su," she. Seeing that Su Rui didn't speak, Wang Yi's eyes glanced in Su Wan's direction. "I'm going to sleep." Su Wan shrugged her shoulders, put down the memorial in her hand, and directly entered the inner room of the palace. She put down the bright yellow embroidered canopy and her whole person disappeared on the dragon bed. "The Empress Dowager has arrived." At this time, the announcement also sounded, and then the Empress Dowager majestically walked in with 10 palace maids and 10 inner servants. Empress Dowager Jin in. Wang Yi directly knelt down and greeted loudly. The Empress Dowager coldly looked at Su Rui, who was still sitting at the table and drinking the soup slowly, and a trace of coldness flashed across her mouth. "Yao, didn't you see Imperial Mother?" "Ah." Hearing the Empress Dowager's words, Su Rui lazily raised his eyes. Zhen's eyes aren't blind. "Of course, I see Empress Dowager." "You. Yao, you're getting more and more excessive these 2 days. This harem is under the jurisdiction of Ai Jia. It's fine if you casually ordered Noble Yu to die, but yesterday, you even killed Empress Shu. Moreover, in the Shangfu Bureau, you killed 4 people in a row without saying a word. Do you know that your atrocities have already spread to the imperial court? Many old ministers are very dissatisfied and have already sent memorials to Ai Jia's palace." Speaking to this point, the Empress Dowager's gaze was sharp and her tone was aggressive. "Zhen killed people, this world is Zhen's. Zhen can kill whoever he wants. If they're dissatisfied, they can tell Zhen personally. Zhen will kill them until they all shut up." After finishing his wife's love soup, Su Rui then took out a bright yellow brocade handkerchief. While elegantly wiping his mouth, he slightly raised his eyebrows and looked at the Empress Dowager in front of him who was wearing a dignified dress. "Empress Dowager, if you're very free, then raise flowers and feed the fish. If you feel lonely, Zhen doesn't mind you casually choosing an imperial uncle to remarry. As for the matters of the imperial court and harem, that's Zhen's matter. Empress Dowager, you don't need to worry about it." "Absurd." Hearing Su Rui's words, the Empress Dowager's dignified face changed color. "Yao, you're becoming more and more absurd. Before your imperial father passed away, he entrusted you to Ai Jia. Ai Jia will never allow our Dongfang family's imperial court to decline in your hands." Such righteous words did sound quite reasonable, but Dongfang family. So Empress Dowager, you also know that this world belongs to the Dongfang family. Su Rui slowly stood up and coldly looked at the Empress Dowager's eyes from top to bottom. Zhen heard that the Yuan family has been very rampant in the capital recently. The foreign relatives are causing chaos in the country. Empress Dowager, you wouldn't also want to plot to usurp the throne, right? This is all slander, all rumors. Feeling the coldness emanating from Su Rui's body, the Empress Dowager couldn't help but take 2 steps back, and her tone also weakened. Ai Jia wholeheartedly thinks for the late emperor and wholeheartedly assists His Majesty. Yao, don't tell me you still don't understand. Yes, Empress Dowager, you and Imperial Father have deep feelings for each other. Zhen sees that you have been missing Imperial Father recently, missing him so much that your whole person is haggard. Speaking up to here, Su Rui suddenly raised his lips and smiled. Wang Yi, pass on Zhen's decree. The Empress Dowager is depressed because she misses the late emperor and is unwell. From today onwards, the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful will close its doors and refuse visitors. If anyone dares to disturb the Empress Dowager's recuperation, no matter who it is, they will all be sentenced to death. You, Dongfang Yao, you want to put Ai Jia under house arrest. Hearing Su Rui's words, the Empress Dowager became excited. At this moment, she couldn't care less about the superficial effort and directly called out Dong Fangyao's name. Dong Fangyao, don't be too presumptuous, ai jia. Come, the Empress Dowager is now emotionally agitated and her health is worrying. Still not hurrying to help her back. If anything happens to your master, none of you will be able to live. Chapter 169. The people of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful came with great momentum, but they hurriedly left with their tails between their legs. After the people of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful left, Su Rui directly drafted an imperial edict and let Wang Yi bring it to the guard camp. From today onwards, the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful will become the place where the Empress Dowager dies of old age. And, if she doesn't court death returning to the inner room, Su Wan was lifting the embroidered tent, holding her chin with both hands, lying on the dragon bed, blinking her eyes and staring at Su Rui's face. What's wrong? Su Rui was baffled by Su Wan's gaze and subconsciously touched his face. Didn't he wipe it just now? Your Majesty is too handsome, blinding this servant's eyes. Su Wan smiled at Su Rui. Who told her family's General Su to be so handsome? No matter how she looked, she couldn't get enough. Su Rui, it's not easy, wife finally found out that I'm good, cough cough. Su Rui coughed twice, deliberately putting on a handsome and elegant posture. He walked to the bed step by step. Come, I won't charge you. I'll let you look a few more times. How about I take off my dragon robe and you look at my 8-pack? No. Su Wan heard Su Rui's words but desperately shook her head. Your Majesty's figure is too good, this servant will have a nosebleed if I look at it. General Su Wan, your style changes too quickly, this general is a bit unable to adapt, huh? Seeing Su Rui stunned on the bed, Su Wan couldn't help but laugh and pounced over, directly throwing General Su on the dragon bed. Your Majesty, you're such a feast for the eyes. No wonder the women in the harem fought to the death for you. This servant is so jealous. Silly wife, I only love you. If you don't like the women in the harem, I'll kill them all, what do you think? Su Rui raised his hands and hugged Su Wan who was lying on his body, staring at her tenderly and lovingly. No, this way you'll become a tyrant and I'll become a witch who brings disaster to the country. Su Wan rubbed against Su Rui's chest. I know that I'm the only one in your heart. As for the women and the imperial harem, if they don't take the initiative to court death, your Majesty, please be magnanimous and let them live. General Su, you're really a genius, you're able to turn a harem schemes into, on the self-cultivation of a tyrant. Alright, whatever you say. Su Rui turned over and pressed Su Wan under his body. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Be good. You've been tired all day. Sleep early. As he spoke, Su Rui turned around and laid by Su Wan's side, gently pulling the brocade quilt for her. Good night. Su Rui raised his arm and a gust of wind blew out all the candles in the inner room. In the suddenly dark bedroom, Su Wan subconsciously leaned into Su Rui's embrace. The two people tightly hugged each other and soon fell asleep peacefully. While Su Wan was sleeping comfortably in Su Rui's arms, Yan Yunhua was still running around to raise money for Su Wan. Yuqing, can you borrow a little more? Outside Wenhua residence, Yan Yunhua stood under the palace lantern and looked at Yan Yuqing anxiously. In the afternoon, Chen Ji had already conveyed by Mama's words to Yan Yunhua. 500 taels of silver was an astronomical figure for Yan Yunhua, whose monthly salary was only 10 taels. After borrowing from the Shangfu Bureau, Yan Yunhua only managed to borrow 40 or so taels, which wasn't even enough for a change. Now, she could only count on Yan Yuqing. Elder sister, I really tried my best. At this time, Yan Yuqing also had a helpless expression. Elder sister, you also know the situation of our Wenhua residents. His Majesty hasn't summoned our master for a long time. Without the Emperor's reward and master's mood isn't good, our days as servants are also not good. As she spoke, Yan Yuqing handed a small brocade box to Yan Yunhua. This is the hairpin that master gave me last month. Elder sister, take it and let the eunuch of the Ministry of Internal Affairs help resell it. It should be worth some silver. This, okay. Yan Yunhua hesitated, but in the end, she accepted the brocade box. Seeing that she accepted the thing, Yan Yuqing's eyes flashed. Elder sister, if you raise enough silver and want to go to Zinteku to see Xiao Wan, can you call me? I'm also worried about her. Okay. Seeing that Yan Yuqing was so concerned about Su Wan, Yan Yunhua also felt happy. Although the three of them were not really related by blood, in this cold harem, the three of them could support each other and share weal and woe together. This was what Yan Yunhua wanted to see the most. Elder sister. I'll go back first. If I come out for too long, master will be unhappy. Seeing that her goal had been achieved, Yan Yuqing patted Yan Yunhua on the shoulder and immediately turned around and quickly entered the gate of Wenhua residence. Yan Yunhua saw that Yan Yuqing's figure had disappeared, so she slowly turned and walked towards the residence of the Shangfu Bureau. On the cold Imperial Road, a lonely figure, Yan Yunhua kept thinking about Su Wan along the way, imagining her very hard and tiring life in Zinteku every day. Yan Yunhua subconsciously clenched the brocade box in her hand. Sister Yunhua. A crisp voice interrupted Yan Yunhua's thoughts. Yan Yunhua looked up and realized that she had unknowingly returned to the residence of the Shangfu Bureau, and the person who called her at this time was Su Bingyue, who had just been recruited into the Shangfu Bureau this afternoon. Bingyue, you haven't slept yet. I'm a little too happy to sleep. Su Bingyue smiled at Yan Yunhua. It's all thanks to Sister Yunhua's help that I can come to the Shangfu Bureau. In the future, Sister Yunhua, you will be my biological sister. While speaking, Su Bingyue had already intimately held Yan Yunhua's arm. There were a lot of people in the Shangfu Bureau, but Liao Si valued Yan Yunhua the most, especially after Su Rui killed the 4 people who often went against Su Wan and Yan Yunhua. In the Shangfu Bureau, Yan Yunhua's status also rose. Although Su Bingyue had just come in, the little girl's ability to observe people's expressions was extraordinary. Now, she had made up her mind to hug Yan Yunhua's thigh tightly first. I didn't help much, but if you encounter any difficulties in the future, you can naturally tell me. Yan Yunhua reluctantly smiled at Su Bingyue, and her tone was as sincere as ever. Su Bingyue quickly noticed that Yan Yunhua was absent-minded. Her eyes turned and she thought of the reason. Sister, are you worried about Sister Su Wan's matter? Yes. Yan Yunhua sighed and subconsciously clenched the brocade box in her hand. I want to help Su Wan, but I still lack a lot of silver. Sister, this is all my family property. Without waiting for Yan Yunhua to finish speaking, Su Bingyue did not hesitate to contribute her purse. Bingyue, this. Yan Yunhua looked at Su Bingyue with surprise. Sister, you are a good person. Sister Su Wan is also a good person. I also want to help her. I don't have much silver, but I also want to do my best to help her. Su Bingyue said with a serious face. Yan Yunhua felt that Su Bingyue, who said these words under the moonlight, was particularly holy. Female lead, you really think too much. In fact, your Virgin Mary halo is too big, causing you to feel that the world is full of love and positive energy everywhere. In fact, the truth is that this harem is full of dense malice, including Yan Yuqing, including Su Bingyue, and even including Su Wan. After accepting Su Bingyue's silver, Yan Yunhua immediately treated Su Bingyue as a sister and couldn't help but tell Su Bingyue the whole thing in detail. Hearing that it would cost 500 silver taels, Su Bingyue couldn't help but secretly click her tongue. However, Just because the palace maids don't have silver doesn't mean that others don't. Sister Yunhua, I know someone who can definitely take out this silver, but I don't know if he is willing to lend it to you. Who? Seeing that Su Bingwei was speaking mysteriously, Yan Yunhua couldn't help but lean in front of her, nervously waiting for her answer. Lu Mushuan, Imperial Physician Lu. Su Bingwei said Lu Mushuan's name in a low voice. Hearing her words, Yan Yunhua couldn't help but think of Lu Mushuan's gentle and handsome face. He thought she had only interacted with him once. Although the people in the palace said that Imperial Physician Lu was a good person, would he be willing to lend so much silver to her? Sister Yunhua, I think Imperial Physician Lu is a very good person, and he treats you. He has seen you before and has an impression of you. Maybe he will help you. Why don't we find a chance to go to the Imperial Hospital tomorrow to find him? Su Bingwei saw that Yan Yunhua was a little moved and couldn't help but take the opportunity to persuade her. In fact, ever since she saw Lu Mushuan in the Imperial Hospital, Su Bingwei was a little moved. Chapter 170. On the third day of entering the Zinzheku, Su Wan still enjoyed the treatment of a nanny in the Zinzheku during the day, and at night, His Majesty the Emperor waited on her. This simple life made Wang Yi envious. Miss Su, you are really the most important servant in the world. Even the Empress Dowager of all the dynasties can't catch up to you. It's really pitiful for Yan Yunhua, who couldn't sleep well in order to save Su Wan, couldn't eat, and even lost a lot of her hair. According to Su Wan's estimation, with Yan Yunhua's character, it would be very difficult to raise 500 taels of silver, so she was ready to wait for her in the Zinzheku for a few more days. But what Su Wan didn't expect was that on the afternoon of the third day, Qin Ji rushed over with 500 taels of silver. Bai Mama received the money and naturally promised to take good care of Su Wan, and Qin Ji also revealed a little that someone would come to visit Su Wan in 2 days. This was taking someone's money to eliminate a disaster. Bai Mama naturally agreed to Qin Ji's words. After sending Qin Ji away, Bai Mama looked at the 500 taels of silver in her hand. It was painful and happy. This money was a good thing, but she didn't dare to embezzle it herself. Miss Su. When Bai Mama came to Su Wan's room, Su Wan was taking a nap after eating. Now, she was still living in the most dilapidated small room, but the bed was made of jade pillows and brocade blankets, but it was not worse than the bed of the imperial concubine. Bai Mama, what's the matter? Su Wan looked at Bai Mama with sleepy eyes. Bai Mama smiled and handed a banknote to Su Wan. Miss Su, this was sent by Qin Gonggong. Keep it well. Qin Ji sent it. Seeing the brand new 500 taels of silver, Su Wan's eyes flashed. Yan Yunhua raised the money so quickly. Who borrowed it from? Who taught her? Su Wan didn't believe that with Holy Mother Yan's character, she would borrow money so quickly and smoothly. Someone must have given her advice. Who was it? Yan Yuqing. Miss Su. Seeing Su Wan's complicated gaze without saying a word, Bai Mama hesitated and took the initiative to speak. At noon today, someone was sneaking around outside the gate of our Zinzheku courtyard. This old slave asked the servants who went in and out. That person seemed to be inquiring about you. This old slave has already told my subordinates not to reveal even a word about you. Oh. Hearing Bai Mama's words, Su Wan smiled. That sneaky person was naturally Wan Xan. She didn't think that she would really come. Su Wan didn't have the leisure to play tricks with her. Nanny, I'm naturally reassured by you. As she spoke, Su Wan raised her hand and lightly stuffed 500 taels of silver into Bai Mama's hand. Mama has worked hard these past few days. This silver is your hard work. As long as Mama does your best, I will naturally not treat Mama unfairly. Thank you, Miss Sue. Bai Mama's tone was a little excited. Oh my, 500 taels. Even the beauties and nobles in the palace wouldn't be able to tip so much money at once. This Miss Sue is not an ordinary person. This old slave is really lucky this time. Bai Mama happily came out of Su Wan's courtyard, and her mood was extremely beautiful. It's just that she didn't expect her fortune to be so strong today. As soon as she returned to the door of her room, Bai Mama saw a little eunuch of the Ministry of Internal Affairs standing in front of her door with a grin. Is it Bai Mama? This slave is Xiaoshunzi of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Xiaoshunzi smiled and handed a pouch to Bai Mama. Mama, today, this slave is here to distribute this month's supplies to the Zintaku, and this. Xiaoshunzi took out an envelope from his arms, and along with the envelope, there was a silver banknote with a denomination of 100 taels. This is. Bai Mama's expression changed slightly. In fact, she already had a guess in her heart. Mama, did a new person come to the Zintaku recently? Xiaoshunzi stuffed the letter and the banknote into the palm of Bai Mama's hand. This is what this official told me to give to that girl. Thank you, Bai Mama. There was no name on the envelope, nor was it for whom it was for, but Bai Mama listened to Xiaoshunzi's words and naturally knew that the letter was for Su Wan. Father-in-law, rest assured, this old slave knows what to do. Bai Mama exchanged a few more polite words with Xiaoshunzi and sent him out of the gate of the Zintaku. Only then did Bai Mama sigh and return to Su Wan's room. At this time, Su Wan was a little surprised to see Bai Mama return. Mama, do you still have something else? Miss Su, this letter and the banknote are for you. Bai Mama handed the envelope and the banknote to Su Wan, but Su Wan just took out the letter with a little doubt and didn't take the banknote in her hand. Bai Mama remained calm, but the corners of her eyes and the tips of her eyebrows were full of joy. This letter is. Su Wan quickly opened the envelope. There was only one piece of paper inside, but the handwriting on it was very strong and powerful. Chen Xingbei. Su Wan saw that the inscription of the letter turned out to be Chen Xingbei's seal. For a moment, she was a little stunned. How could she forget this genuine male lead? It turned out that the news of the accident in the Shangfu Bureau had already spread out. In the original plot, Chen Xingbei and Su Wan should have officially recognized each other and then passed on their love. However, before Chen Xingbei could write a letter, the Shangfu Bureau had an accident. After hearing about the Shangfu Bureau in the guard camp, Chen Xingbei anxiously asked someone to inquire about it for 2 days before he found out that Su Wan had been sent to the Zintaku. Fortunately, the Chen family was still quite wealthy. Chen Xingbei immediately took 100 taels of silver and wrote a letter in his own hand. He entrusted the people of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to bring the letter and the silver to the Zintaku. To be able to take out 100 taels of silver at once, this person was quite considerate. Chen Xingbei's letter was very short. In the letter, he roughly talked about his current situation, and then said that he would find a way to save Su Wan and let her endure for a few more days. Putting away the letter, Su Wan leaned on the bed and narrowed her eyes. Now that the male and female leads are in place, the female supporting is ambitious, and the male supporting is also ready to take over at any time, then let's start acting. In the end, who can enlighten who? Will they fail and withdraw, or will the Holy Mother abandon the light for the dark? We will see the ending of this drama. Bai Mama. Su Wan's gaze fell on Bai Mama at some point. Hearing Su Wan's voice, Bai Mama immediately came forward with a smile. Miss Su, what instructions do you have? It is said that money makes the world go round. Now, Bai Mama has been completely bribed by Su Wan and follows her blindly. You find a way to inform Qin Ji and tell him that the day after tomorrow is a good opportunity. Let him bring people to see me. Su Wan needed to make a little preparation. She wanted to make herself as miserable as possible. She must give Holy Mother Yen a knowing blow, so that she would never forget for the rest of her life that her good sister had suffered and been offended for her. In this way, Su Wan would be able to sing better in the future, this old servant understands. Hearing Su Wan's instructions, Bai Mama immediately nodded her head vigorously. This matter is easy, she will definitely do it properly. Shangfu Bureau. When Chen Ji received the news sent by Bai Mama, he had just returned to the Shangfu Bureau. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Yan Yunhua and Su Bingyue about to go out together. Chen Ji narrowed his red phoenix eyes and looked at Su Bingyue. This little girl looked like a restless person at first glance. And he didn't like it. Chen Gonggong. Yan Yunhua and Su Bingyue were about to go out with the brocade when they met Chen Ji at the door. The two people naturally immediately stepped forward and saluted respectfully. Yunhua, come over here. Zejia has something to say to you. Chen Ji waved his hand at Yan Yunhua, and Yan Yunhua immediately ran over anxiously. Chen Gonggong, is there any change on Xiao Wan's side? At this time, Yan Yunhua couldn't help but think of Su Wan. She just sent the silver over at noon. The other side wouldn't change their mind so soon, right? It's about Su Wan, but it's a good thing. Chen Ji saw Yan Yunhua's anxious appearance and didn't beat around the bush. He directly relayed Bai Mama's words to her. At noon the day after tomorrow, pack up and I will take you over. Really? Yan Yunhua's eyes immediately lit up when she heard Chen Ji's words. Chen Gonggong, thank you so much, and can I bring 2 more people over? And hearing Yan Yunhua's words, Chen Ji hesitated for a moment. He thought that Bai Mama didn't have any requirements for the number of people, and the Zinzheku was a dirty and messy place. Only people with mental problems would be willing to always run there, right? Ba ba ba, Chen Ji scolded in his heart. Stupid as hell. Didn't I always go there these days? His Majesty the Emperor, who also always ran there, was also shot. Wang Yi, shot +1. Okay. Chen Ji saw Yan Yunhua's cautious appearance and couldn't help but wave his hand. Alas, he was too soft-hearted. Countless people who were stabbed in the back by Chen Ji, why are you so soft-hearted? Chapter 171. It was noon, and the weather was warm. Yan Yunhua, Su Bingyue, and Yan Yuqing, who had already made an appointment, followed Chen Ji and hurriedly came to the courtyard gate of Zinzheku. Because Bai Mama had an appointment with Chen Ji, she was standing outside the courtyard gate and waiting for a long time. Mama. Chen Ji flicked his horsetail whisk and smiled charmingly at Bai Mama. These girls are Su Wan's little sisters. It's okay to let them go in and take a look, right? This was originally not allowed. Bai Mama pretended to show an embarrassed expression. However, since Chen Gonggong has spoken, this old slave will naturally give you face. There are not many people in the courtyard now, and Su Wan has just returned. You can go in and see her. Remember to be quick. As she spoke, Bai Mama waved her hand and summoned a servant of Zinzheku. You may take them to see Su Wan. Yu Mei was Bai Mama's confidant. When she heard Bai Mama's words, she immediately stepped forward respectfully. Elder sisters, come with me. According to age, Yu Mei was several years older than Yan Yunhua and the others, but the harem was a place that paid great attention to rank and status. In front of high-level palace maids like them, the people of Zinzheku had to respectfully address each other as elder sister. Because Su Wan lived in the innermost place, Yu Mei took everyone through almost half of Zinzheku's courtyard. Looking at the haggard palace maids in the courtyard, Yan Yuqing and Su Bingyue both frowned, and Yan Yunhua's face flashed with discomfort. Miss Yu Mei, what does Su Wan do in Zinzheku? Is it hard? Yan Yunhua couldn't help but inquire about Su Wan's recent situation. She was eager to know how Su Wan was doing here. When she heard Yan Yunhua's words, Yu Mei just smiled bitterly. This elder sister, what we do in Zintaku is the most lowly and laborious work. The newcomers are generally pouring night incense, cleaning the toilets of the 3rd hall, or cleaning the weeds of the 6th hall. In short, their lives are cheap. How can they be qualified to say that it's hard? Hearing Yu Mei's words, Yan Yunhua's entire face turned pale. Yan Yuqing and Su Bingyue looked at each other, and they subconsciously shuddered. This Zintaku is really not a place for people to stay. We're here. At this time, Yu Mei's footsteps stopped in front of a dilapidated house. This is where Su Wan lives. She came last and can only live in the farthest and worst room. You guys better be mentally prepared before going in. With that, Yu Mei took a deep look at the 3 of them, then shook her head and turned to leave. Sister. Looking at the dilapidated wooden door, Yan Yuqing subconsciously pulled Yan Yunhua's sleeve. Yan Yunhua also took a deep breath and stepped forward to push open the wooden door. Creak. As the wooden door opened, a cloud of choking dust splashed out. Cough, cough. Su Bingyue, who was standing on the far right, choked on the dust and couldn't help but cough. Her coughing alarmed the people in the room. Sister Yunhua, why are you here? The entire room was very narrow. Other than an old wooden bed leaning against the wall, there was only a teetering wooden table and a chair that was missing a corner. At this time, Su Wan was sitting on the wooden bed and lowering her head to apply medicine on herself. Hearing the movement at the door, she raised her head and looked at the 3 people at the door with great surprise. Xiao Wan. Facing Su Wan's gaze, Yan Yunhua's eyes immediately turned red. How could the Su Wan in front of her still have the delicate and healthy appearance from a few days ago? At this time, she was wearing a shabby and thin coarse slave uniform. Her long hair was slightly dry and messy, and her originally fair little face was now waxy yellow. Xiao Wan, what happened to your arm? Yan Yunhua's gaze fell from Su Wan's face to her body, and only then did she realize that there was a long bloodstain on her arm. At this time, the blood from the wound had begun to coagulate. Seeing such a long wound, Yan Yunhua immediately screamed, and Su Bingyue behind her even turned her face to the side timidly. Don't worry. Su Wan was very satisfied with Yan Yunhua's performance. She smiled weakly at Yan Yunhua. This was accidentally scratched when I was working in the morning. It's nothing. I've often been injured these days, so I'll slowly get used to it. As she spoke, Su Wan once again poured all the Jinshuang medicine powder in her hand onto her wound. The piercing pain in that instant made her face deathly pale and a layer of fine sweat immediately seeped out of her forehead. Xiao Wan, let me help you apply the medicine. Yan Yunhua saw that it was really inconvenient for Su Wan to apply the medicine by herself. She couldn't help but say as she quickly stepped forward. Yan Yuqing and Su Bingyue behind her also looked at each other and followed her to the bed. The 3 people busily helped Su Wan treat the wound. Yan Yuqing took out a clean handkerchief from her arms and helped Su Wan bandage her arm. After doing all this, Yan Yunhua couldn't help but sit by the bed and take Su Wan's hand. Xiao Wan, I'm sorry. You suffered so much because of me. Don't worry, I will find a way to save you. I will definitely save you. Sister Yunhua, I believe you. You are like my sister. In this harem, you are my dearest person, and Yuqing. Su Wan's gaze slowly fell on Yan Yuqing and Su Bingyue. Yuqing and Bingyue are also good people. I'm really happy to know you sisters. Sister Xiao Wan, this is what we should do. Without waiting for Yan Yuqing to speak, Su Bingyue stepped forward and grabbed Su Wan's other hand. Although I'm just a little palace made of the Shangfu Bureau now, Sister Xiao Wan, I will find a way to save you with Sister Yunhua. You must wait for us. After listening to Su Bingyue's words, Su Wan's eyes flashed and she nodded firmly. Yan Yuqing, who had been silent, moved her lips several times. Because Su Bingyue always snatched the right to speak, she had to stand at the back sullenly and look at Su Bingyue with a complicated gaze. The four sisters didn't chat for too long before Bai Mama sent someone to call Su Wan to continue working. Seeing Su Wan's thin body staggering while carrying a thick wooden bucket, her figure became more and more deeply engraved in Yan Yunua's heart. The so-called true sisters are like this. They can do anything for you and treat you with sincerity. Xiao Wan, in this life, I, Yan Yunua, will remember your kindness and remember that you are my sister. In her heart, she secretly vowed to repay Su Wan. When Yan Yunua left, her eyes became particularly firm. She will think of a way, she will definitely think of a way. After Yan Yunua and the others left, Su Wan returned to her room again. The heavy wooden bucket had long been taken away by Yume. Bai Mama looked at the wound on Su Wan's body that was still losing blood and couldn't help but frown. Miss Su, do you want to find someone to call Steward Wang over? In the eyes of Bai Mama, this Miss Su was not a golden branch or jade leaf, but she was more precious than that. Such a person with such status would cut a knife on her body just like that. It was the first time Bai Mama had seen a woman who was so ruthless to herself. There were many women in the harem who knew how to play tricks, but most of them would cry, make a fuss, or try to frame others. How many people were willing to use their own bodies to make a fuss? Their bodies were very precious. Don't call Wang Yi. Bai Mama, you can go to the Imperial Hospital and help me get some painkillers. Su Wan looked down at the wound on her arm. The wound was very long, and because there was a lot of blood, it looked very scary. In fact, the wound wasn't too deep. When Su Wan made her move, she also calculated the aim. In addition to the strong visual impact of bleeding, such a wound would only leave a very long and ugly scar. Su Wan wanted to use this scar to constantly remind Yan Yunua of what she had endured for her, and with Yan Yunua's saintly character, she would never be able to escape from the palm of her hand in this life.